coming in. Okay. Yeah. All right, then. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Committee on Government Operations. Today is Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. This is a hearing on Docket 0683, Ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston. I am Lydia Edwards, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Government Ops. And this matter was sponsored by Councillors Wu and Councillor Arroyo, on May 6th. In accordance with the, and I see joining us, Councillor Sabi George, awesome. In accordance with Governor Baker's executive order modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law, we are able to have this hearing and conducting it via Zoom. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health accommodations. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN 82/Verizon 1964. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee, email at ccc.go@boston.gov, and it will be made part of the official record. This is an ordinance that would ban the use of facial surveillance by the City of Boston or any official in the City of Boston. The proposal would also prohibit entering into agreements, contracts to obtain face surveillance with third parties. I'm going to turn it now over to the lead sponsors, Councillor Wu and Councillor Arroyo, and then I will turn it to my colleagues in order of arrival for opening remarks. So, and just to acknowledge my colleagues, and I believe the order that I have so far, Councillor, again, it will be Councillor Arroyo, Councillor Wu, Councillor Braden, Councillor Bach, Councillor Mejia, Councillor Campbell, and then I had Councillor O'Malley, Councillor Asabi George, and then I'm sorry, I started talking. So other councillors have joined us? Okay.
I've been on, Madam Chair.
Councillor Flaherty was before me, Councillor Edwards. Thanks.
Yeah, I've been on for a while.
I apologize. Councillor Flaherty, then Councillor Campbell, then Councillor O'Malley, then Councillor Asabi George. Very well. I will now turn it over to the lead sponsors.
Does that start with me?
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we have excellent panelists to kind of go into the intricacies of the facial recognition ban, but to just kind of summarize it, this facial recognition ban creates a community process that makes our systems more inclusive of community consent while adding democratic oversight where there currently is none. We would be joining our neighbors in Cambridge and Somerville, and specifically when it comes to facial recognition tech, it doesn't work. It's not good. It's been proven through the data to be less accurate for people with darker skin. A study by one of our panelists, Joy Bulamwini, research at MIT found that Black women were 35% more likely than white men to be misclassified by face surveillance technology. The reality is that face surveillance isn't very effective in its current form. According to records obtained by the ACLU, one manufacturer promoting this technology in Massachusetts admitted that it might only work about 30% of the time. Currently, my understanding is that the Boston Police Department does not use this. This isn't a ban on surveillance. This is simply a ban on facial recognition surveillance, which I think the data has shown doesn't work. BPD doesn't use it because, and I'll allow Commissioner Gross to speak on it, but my understanding from what I've heard in past comments from Commissioner Gross is that they don't want to use technology that doesn't work well. And so this ban isn't necessarily even a permanent ban. It just creates a process where we are banning something that doesn't have community process, that doesn't have community consent, and which would require some democratic oversight if they ever do want to implement it, if the technology in the future ever does improve. And so with that, I see the rest of my time. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you also to my co-sponsor, Councillor Wu.
Councillor Wu?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you also to Councillor Arroyo and all of the coalition partners that have been working at this for many months and providing all sorts of incredibly important feedback. We scheduled this hearing many weeks ago at this point, I think over a month ago, and it just so happened that the timing of it now has lined up with a moment of great national trauma. And in this moment, the responsibility is on each one of us to step up to truly address systemic racism and systemic oppression, but the responsibility is especially on elected officials, policymakers, those of us who have the power and the ability to make change now. So I am proud that Boston has the potential to join our sister cities across Massachusetts in taking this immediate step to ban a technology that has been proven to be racially discriminatory and that threatens basic rights. We are thankful that Boston police agree with that assessment and do not use facial recognition and facial surveillance today in Boston, and are looking to codify that understanding so that with the various mechanisms for technology and upgrades and changing circumstances of different administrations and personalities, that we just have it on the books that protections come first, because we truly believe that public health and public safety should be grounded in trust. So, the chair gave a wonderful description of this ordinance. I am looking forward to the discussion, but most of all, I'm grateful to colleagues and everyone who has contributed to this conversation, as well as the larger conversation about community-centered oversight of surveillance, which will be in a separate but related docket that will be moving forward on the council. Thank you very much.
Councillor Braden, opening remarks.
Oops. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the makers of this ordinance. I really look forward to the conversation this afternoon. I'm very proud to participate in this discussion. I think it's the proper and right thing to do, to really consider deeply all the implications of new technology that hasn't been proven to be effective before introducing it in any city in Massachusetts. So I really look forward to learning more and hearing from the panelists this afternoon. Thank you.
Councillor Bach.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope everyone will forgive me for being outside for a minute. I want to just say I'm excited about this conversation today. I think it's a piece of action we should absolutely take, and I just want to say that I think it's really important that this technology has major shortcomings, and that also it has a racial bias built into it. Those are really good reasons not to use it. But honestly, even if those did not hold, I think that in this country, we run the risk sometimes of just starting to do things that new technology can do without asking ourselves, like, as a democratic populace, as a community, is this something that we should do? And I think in the process, we as Americans have given up a lot of our rights of privacy, frankly, as often as not to private corporations as to government. But I think that it's really important to just remember that there's a true public interest in a society that is built more on trust than on surveillance. And so I think it's really important for us to draw this line in the sand so that, if the technology improves and some of those arguments that are based on kind of its functionality start to slip away, that we're still gonna have a real conversation together about how, how we wanna live and what kind of a society we wanna be. So to me, putting a moratorium ban like this into place makes a ton of sense. And I'm excited for the conversation and grateful to all the advocates. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mejia.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about my audio. Thank you, Chair, Woman Edwards, and thank you to the makers, Councillor Wu and Arroyo, for your leadership on this issue. For me, this issue is personal and professional. As a Dominican woman who claims her Black roots, facial recognition technology misidentifies people like me by 35%. We're in a time where our technology is outpacing our morals. We've got a 2020 technology with a 1620 state of mind. Let that sink in. As a city, we need to practice extreme caution over facial recognition technology, and we should be concerned not only with this technology goes wrong, but also when it goes right. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to building trust in our government. Working against this facial recognition technology is a good first step, and I'm happy to hear there's pushback against this kind of surveillance on all sides of the issue. Like the makers of the ordinance mentioned, right now, there is not a desire to put facial recognition technology in place, and this ordinance is an opportunity to put that into law. I look forward to the discussion, and I hope to continue to push on this issue alongside Councilor Wu and Arroyo. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the sponsors for this hearing. As I've stated in the past, technology updates and advances have provided us with many advantages, but at the same time, they've also proven to be deeply flawed, unreliable, and disproportionately impacting communities of color. This technology, just for everyone's full disclosure listening, this technology is currently not being used by the BPD for that reason. And obviously I see our commissioner is here, and good afternoon to the commissioner. I appreciate the work that you've been doing through all of this, whether it's just the day-to-day public safety rigors of your job, or it's been through the COVID-19 response, or it's been most recently and tragically in response to George Floyd's horrific death and everything that has come from that. I want to make sure that I'm going to continue to remain supportive of setting transparent limits in creating a public process by which we assess the use of these technologies. I know that we've been able to solve a lot of crimes through video surveillance and also through video, quite frankly, and also they've led to justice for families. As someone that has lost a cousin due to murder, but for it was surveillance and it was DNA that led to my family getting justice. So looking forward to learning more about this and the commissioner's perspective on it, but also recognizing that collectively we need to make sure that we're putting forth decisions that make the most sense for Boston. Not quite, I'll get real parochial here. I'm not, quite frankly, I'm not really concerned about Cambridge and Somerville. I want to make sure that whatever we're doing in Boston is impacting all of our neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that I represent as a citywide city councilor. So, and making sure that we have community input. Most importantly, we work for the people of Boston. As councilors, obviously, as the commissioner, as police officers, we work for the residents and the taxpayers of our city. So they need a seat at the table, and we want to hear from them. If the technology enhances and it help us as a public safety tool, great. But as the time stands, it's still unreliable, and there are flaws to it. So as a result of which, that's where I'm going to be on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. I know you're going to run a tight ship given what's all that's happening today, including the funeral, of course, for George Floyd. So thank you very much. Thank you also, of course, to the commissioner for being here, given all that's going on. I know you've been on the record in the past with respect to this issue, and that not only does the department not have it, but you understand the flaws of it. So thank you for being here. Thank you to my council colleagues, but also most importantly, the makers for putting this forward. I have been supportive of this since the very beginning when I hosted, along with Councillor Wu and Councillor McCarthy, a hearing on this very issue, along with some other surveillance technologies and things that were possibly coming down the pipe. So this was an opportunity for us to have this conversation on what we could do proactively to make sure that surveillance tools were not put into place without a robust community process and, of course, council input. So back then I supported it, and I support it now. Again, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you to your team. Thank you to the makers, and thank you, Madam Chair. And Aiden also says thank you.
Thank you, Aiden, and thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, I want to thank the makers, Councillors Wu and Arroyo, for their leadership here. Obviously, I support the facial recognition ban. Also grateful, want to echo my thanks to the Commissioner for his comments and his opposition to the fact that this isn't used. So it's important that we codify that in such a way, which again is the purpose of this hearing and this ordinance, and stand ready, willing, and able to get to work. Thank you, and look forward to hearing from a number of residents, our panelists, as well as the public testimony after. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner for being with us this afternoon. I look forward to hearing from him and from the panelists discussing this ordinance further. I think that it is necessary to ban this technology at this point. I think that our colleagues have brought to the forefront over the last few years, as have the advocates, around the concerns regarding this kind of technology. So that I, appreciate the real concerns around accuracy and biases against people of color, women, children, the elderly, and certainly reflective of our city's residents. So we need to make sure that we're proactive in protecting our residents and having a deeper understanding and appreciation of this technology and understanding what this ordinance would mean around that ban and following through with it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I understand Councillor Flynn is trying to get in, and there might be limits. I'm just saying that for our tech folks. In the meantime, I'm going to read a letter from City Council President Kim Janey. Dear Chairwoman Edwards, due to technical difficulties, I'm unable to log in for today's hearing on Docket 0683 regarding an ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston. I will continue to work on the technical challenges on my end and will join the hearing at a later time if I am able. If I am unable to join, I will review the recording at a later time. I want to thank the makers, Councillors Wu and Arroyo, for their advocacy and continued leadership on this critical issue. I especially want to thank all the advocates who are participating for their tireless advocacy on this issue. I look forward to working with advocates to incorporate their ideas and how we can push this issue moving forward. It is clear we need policies in place to protect communities that are vulnerable to technologies that are biased against them. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this critical issue and will continue to fight for an agenda that promotes and protects Black lives. Please read this letter into the record. Thank you. Sincerely, Kim Janey. I'm not sure if we've been joined by Councillor Flynn. I do know he was trying to get in. In the meantime, I did want to just do some quick housekeeping as part of my introductory remarks. Just to let people know, again, today's hearing is specifically about this proposed ordinance that would ban facial recognition technology. We had a robust conversation about defunding the police, discussing all aspects of the budget. All of those different things just happened, and it was chaired by Councillor Bach. And I want to make sure that our conversations are related, that we do not take this precious moment on this legislation and have it covered up by the other conversation. So I just want you to know that. And I will move the conversation towards this ordinance. There should be a copy of it. People should have the ability to discuss about this language in this ordinance. Questions I have. I do want to talk about whether time is of the essence. There seemed to have been some issue and concern about whether we were entering a contract that allowed for this. So when the commissioner speaks, I'd like for him to speak on that. I'm not sure if there's a contract pending, what's going on. I also want to make sure that folks understand, due to the fact that I think we have possibly 100 people signed up to speak. We have a lot of folks who are going to be speaking on the panel. I'm going to limit my colleagues to 3 minutes in their first round, and I'm going to get the public to no more than 2, and I'm going to try my best to get through that list. So I see we've been joined by Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flynn, do you have any opening remarks?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and to the sponsors, and looking forward to this hearing, learning more about the proposal, and also interested in hearing from the Commissioner of Police, Commissioner Gross, and with the public as well. Again, this is an issue that we all can learn from. We can listen to each other. We can be respectful and hear each other's point of view. And that's what this city is all about, is coming together and treating each other fairly and with respect, especially during difficult days and on difficult issues. I also know that our police commissioner is someone that also listens to people, and he's in the neighborhoods, and he talks and listens to a lot of the concerns of the residents. That's what I like most about the police commissioner, is his ability to listen and treat people fairly. Again, I'm here to listen and learn about the proposal. Thank you, Councilor Edwards, for your strong leadership.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. I just want to let people know we actually have a 100-person limit on the Zoom. We have 118 people trying to get in. So once you've testified, could you, if you sign out, that allows for other people to get in. Commissioner Ross, you've been waiting. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. I'm going to ask you, get right to the ordinance and get to the concerns and thoughts on that. Happy to discuss any procedure. Then we're going to try and get to the panelists and move back to the city council while you're still here. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll proceed. Good afternoon, everyone. And God bless Mr. George Floyd. May you rest in peace. And for the record, I'm proud of Boston as they paid great homage and peaceful protest. And anything we can do to move our department forward, working with our community, you have it on record right here and now. I'm willing to work with you, councilors, the mayor, in our great city. So thank you. So I will start and thank you, the chair and the committee members and the makers, Councillor Wu and Arroyo. I really thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing regarding the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston. As you can imagine, the Boston Police Department has been extremely busy meeting the current demands of public safety from the COVID-19 pandemic and the public rallies. However, the department and I understand the importance of the given topic. I would like to request that this hearing remain on the given topic and that we work together to find other times to discuss the important issues regarding police relations, national issues on police reform, and the ways that we can improve our relationships here in Boston. As has been practiced in the past, we welcome a future opportunity to discuss the ordinance language and city council concerns in a working session regarding technology policy and potential privacy concerns. My testimony today is meant to serve as a background to BPD's current practices and identify potential technological needs. The department, for the record, does not currently have the technology for facial recognition. As technology advances, however, many vendors have and will continue to incorporate automated recognition abilities. We have prohibited these features as we have moved along in our advancements, with the intention to have rich dialogue with the community prior to any acquisition of such technology. Video has proven to be one of the most effective tools for collecting evidence of criminal offenses, for solving crimes, and locating missing and exploited individuals. Any prohibitions on these investigative tools without a full understanding of potential uses under strict protocols could be harmful and impede our ability to protect the public. The proposed ordinance defines facial surveillance to mean an automated or semi-automated process that assists in identifying or verifying an individual, or in capturing information about an individual based on the physical characteristics of an individual's face. And to be clear, the department has no desire to employ a facial surveillance system to generally surveil the citizens of Boston. The department, however, notes a distinction between facial surveillance systems and facial recognition technology. The department believes that the term facial recognition technology better describes the investigative nature of the technology we believe would be useful to the city with the right safeguards and community input. The department would, as technology advances and becomes more reliable, like the opportunity to discuss the utilization of facial recognition technology to respond to specific crimes and emergency situations. And I would like to revisit everyone's thoughts and remembrances of the Boston Marathon and the most recent kidnappings. Facial recognition technology, to the best of our knowledge, would greatly reduce the hours necessary to review video evidence. This would also allow investigators to move more quickly, identify victims, missing persons, or suspects of crime through citywide camera recordings. This technology, if acquired, would also allow for the compilation and condensing of video to be done more efficiently. Facial recognition technology used with well-established guidelines and under strict review can also provide a safer environment for all in the city of Boston. Creating a system in which evidence is reviewed in a timely manner and efficiently allows for police to intervene and reduce levels of crime would be beneficial. The department rejects any notion in the ordinance that would ever use facial recognition technology in our response to COVID-19 pandemic. And just for the record, I'd like to repeat that. The department rejects any notion in the ordinance that we are or will ever use facial recognition technology in our response to COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, it is important to note the department shares the concerns of our community and our community concerns around privacy and intrusive surveillance. As it is the current practice with existing technology, our intentions are to implement any potential future advances in facial recognition technology through well-defined protocols and procedures. Some areas we consider this technology may be beneficial are in identifying the route and locations of missing persons, including the suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, those suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, as well missing children, kidnapped individuals, human trafficking victims, and the suspects of assaults and shootings. Also, the victims of homicide and domestic abuse. Important to note, we would like to work with the council and our partners to clearly articulate the language that could best describe these uses. In section B2 of the proposed ordinance, it indicates there is some intention to account for the use of this technology to advance investigations, but the department believes some additional language referencing permitted uses is necessary. We as well would appreciate a working session within the next 60 days to draft language that we can collectively present to constituents and requesting interest groups for feedback and input. We also plan to use the public testimony being provided in today's hearing to assist in our decision making. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to provide this testimony and your continued interest and time in creating public forums around police technology and advancements. That's my official statement that I read in. And I'm telling you right now, as an African-American male, the technology that is in place today does not meet the standards of the Boston Police Department, nor does it meet my standards. And until technology advances to a point where it is more reliable, again, we will need your input, your guidance, and we'll work together to pick that technology which is more conducive to our privacy and our rights as citizens of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Gross. Do you, just before I go on, we're going to go now to Joy Buolamwini, and I'm so sorry for that, Joy. I apologize profusely for the butchering of your last name. Mikhail McKellen, Karina Ham, Katie Crockford, Eric Berg, and Joshua Barokas. But I wanted to ask the commissioner just very quickly, you said you have suggested language or that you would want to work on suggested language for B2?
No, I would want to work on it. So keep in mind, anything we do going forward, as I promised for the last 4 years, we want your input and your guidance. Councilor Mejia, you hit it on point. This technology is not fair to everyone, especially African Americans, Latinos. It's not there yet. So moving forward, we have to make sure everybody's comfortable with this type of technology.
Thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over to some of the folks who have been called for to speak. I hope we're going to try and get through as many of them as possible, Commissioner. These are the folks who helped to push and move this ordinance. We really hope you can stay as long as you can to hear them also speak.
I'm looking forward to working with the folks in the community.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Joy, do I?
Hello.
Oh, wonderful. Joy, the floor is yours. If you could take about 3 minutes or no more.
Sounds good. So thank you so much, Madam Chair Edwards, members of the Committee on Government Operations, and members of the Boston City Council for the opportunity to testify today. I am the founder of the Algorithmic Justice League and an algorithmic bias researcher. I've conducted MIT studies showing some of the largest recorded gender and racial biases in AI systems sold by companies including IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon. As you've heard, the deployment of facial recognition and related technologies has major civil rights implications. These tools also have technical limitations that further amplify harms for Black people, Indigenous people, other communities of color, women, the elderly, those with dementia and Parkinson's, youth, trans, and gender non-conforming individuals. In one test I ran, Amazon's AI even failed on the face of Oprah Winfrey, labeling her male. Personally, I've had to resort to wearing a white mask to have my dark skin detected by some of this technology. But given mass surveillance applications, not having my face detected can be a benefit. We do not need to look to China to see this technology being used for surveillance of protesters with little to no accountability, and too often in violation of our civil and human rights, including First Amendment rights of freedom of expression, association, and assembly. When the tech works, we can't forget about the cost of surveillance, but in other contexts, it can fail, and the failures can be harmful. Misidentifications can lead to false arrests and accusations. In April 2019, a Brown University senior was misidentified as a terrorist suspect in the Sri Lanka Easter bombings. The police eventually corrected the mistake, but she still received death threats. Mistaken identity is more than an inconvenience, and she's not alone. In the UK, the faces of over 2,400 innocent people were stored by the police department without their consent. The department reported a false positive identification rate of over 90%. In the US, there are no reporting requirements generally speaking, so we're operating in the dark. Further, these tools do not have to identify unique faces to be harmful. An investigation reported that IBM equipped the NYPD with tools to search for people in video by facial hair and skin tone. In short, these tools can be used to automate racial profiling. The company recently came out to denounce the use of these tools for mass surveillance and profiling. IBM's move to stop selling facial recognition technology underscores its dangers. Due to the consequences of failure, I focused my MIT research on the performance of facial analysis systems. I found that for the task of gender classification, IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon had error rates of no more than 1% for lighter skinned men. In the worst case, these rates soared to over 30% for darker skinned women. Subsequent government studies complement this work. They show that continued error disparities in facial analysis and other tasks, including face recognition. The latest government study of 189 algorithms revealed consequential racial, gender, and age bias in many of the algorithms tested. Still, even if error rates improve, the capacity for abuse, lack of oversight, and deployment limitations pose too great a risk. Given known harms, the City of Boston should ban government use of face surveillance. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much. And to correct my horrible mispronunciation of your name, would you mind saying your full name for the record again?
Sure, my name is Joy Blomwini.
Thank you very much, Joy. I'm going to now turn over to Mikkel McKellen, a youth advocate. I'm also going to set the clock 3 minutes. Mikkel?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, City Council. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael McMillan. I'm a youth advocate. I'm also organizer for I live in New Jersey, Haley, which is Bromley Heath. So I just want to talk about a little bit what I've seen going on with the sense of surveillance technology. For centuries, Black folks have been the guinea pig in America. From experiments with our bodies to destroying our communities, it seems that history never does repeat itself. Do I agree policing has evolved? Yes. They're no longer catching slaves, but catching poor Black and brown folks. On January, so I want to talk about 3 years ago, roughly January around 2017, there were residents in my neighborhood that came up to me that they had seen a drone flying in the area, and they had seen it numerous times, and nobody could figure out who was flying the drone, who was controlling it. And so upon receiving this information, I live across the street from a soda company, and later on that night, I seen officers playing with a drone, and I ended up taking the photos of the drone, and it kind of jogs my memory back that this was the drone that a lot of the residents in my neighborhood had seen and had talked about, that no one knew who was flying the drone. It comes to my knowledge of the police. So with doing some research, reaching out to a friend over at ACLU, and we tried to file a public records request, which we were denied our first time, and then eventually got it to where the Boston Police has spent the amount of $17,500 on 3 police drones. And nobody knew about it from City Council to the public. It was kind of just an kept secret. And there was no community oversight, but these drones were flying illegally inside our neighborhood. And just the breach of privacy, the not knowing what information was being collected, what was being stored, how it was being stored, that really scared a lot of folks in my neighborhood. And to the point that a lot of them didn't want to speak up because of past experience of dealing with police and being harassed. Nobody wanted that backlash. But at the same time, we have to be, as residents, and have to empower one another and have to speak up. And sometimes it has to be somebody, regardless if it's myself or another individual. We have to hold people accountable. And something that Monica Cannon says, another activist, that accountability has no color. So regardless if you're white, Black, in a blue uniform, you still have to be held accountable. And then just to see that no one was held accountable was a scary thing, because it kind of just enforces their control and their will into these communities. Nobody ever gets held accountable because our voices are muffled by money or just a knee in the neck. Rest in peace to George Floyd, but I concede my time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Perfect testimony, and I really appreciate you speaking from the heart, from your own experience, and also demonstrating how you've actually the conversation for accountability through your leadership. So I want to thank you for that. Up next, we have Karina Ham from the Student Immigrant Movement. 3 minutes. Karina?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at this hearing. My name is Karina Ham, and I'm the field organizer for the Student Immigrant Movement. I would like to also thank our partners who've been working on the facial recognition ban, City Councilors Michelle Wu, Ricardo Arroyo, Andrea Campbell, Kim Janey, Anissa Savi-George, along with ACLU of Massachusetts, Muslim Justice League, and Unafraid Educators. So SIM is a statewide grassroots organization by and for the undocumented youth. We work closely with our members, or our young people, to create trusting and empowering relationships. At SIM, we fight for the permanent protection of our undocumented youth and their families through collective action. And one of the major roles of the work in the organizing that we do is to challenge these systems that continue to exploit and disenfranchise the undocumented and immigrant communities. So I am here on behalf of SIM to support the ban on facial recognition, because it's another system, it's another tool that will intentionally be used against marginalized community. So the undocumented and immigrant community is not mutually exclusive to one particular group. We have transgender people, Black, Latinx, Muslim, people with disabilities, and it's so intersectional And so the stakes for getting misidentified are high because this creates a dangerous situation for people who are undocumented. And these programs are made to accurately identify white adult males, leaving Black and brown folks at risk on top of living in marginalized community. And so many of the young people I work with are students who are in college and many are still in high school. Face surveillance technology is not meant for children and it's not meant for the young people. And law enforcement already uses it to monitor the youth in places like Lockport, New York. Their face surveillance system has been adopted in their school district, and they've already spent over $1 million in the system. And so you ask yourself, well, what is exactly the intent to have these surveillance? The youth still have the right to their privacy and have the right to live without constant infringement and interference of law enforcement. If another city allows facial surveillance in their schools to happen, the chance of that occurring here is high as well if we do not ban facial recognition in Boston. And we believe this because the youth, the undocumented youth, they are already not protected in their schools. School disciplinary reports, which currently have no guideline, protocol, or clear criteria on what exactly school officers can write, are sent to the superintendent and their designee to sign off and sent to the Boston Police Department. And still, we've seen that some of these reports actually go straight to the police department with no oversight. And so this endangers the life of immigrant youth because Boston Police Department share information and databases with agencies like ICE, so it creates a gateway to imprisonment and deportation for many of these young folks. And so adding facial surveillance in the schools and in the city would be used against those same students who are already at risk for being separated from their community. We know that Black and brown youth experience suppression every day, and they already are deemed suspicious by law enforcement based on their skin color and the clothes they wear, the people they interact with, and more. And so adding facial recognition that's not even accurate to surveil our youth and families will just be used to justify their arrests or deportation. And through the policing system, we are already asking for police officers to engage with the youth in ways that are just harmful to the youth's development. The city of Boston needs to stop criminalizing young folks, whether they engage in criminal activity or not. Arresting them will not get to the root of the problem. There are so many options that are much safer and more secure for our youth, for the families and their futures. Banning facial recognition would mean law enforcement has one less tool to criminalize our youth. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Commissioner, I understand time would be of the essence, but I'm really hoping you could stay till about 4:15, 4:30. Please, please. You're on mute.
I can stay until 4. That's it. I have to go at 4. That long.
Okay. So
And
the reason
I appreciate everyone's testimony as well. I have a team. We're taking notes, so don't think when I go that no one's taking notes. So we would really want to meet again and discuss this technology.
I know that there are some counselors that have some clarifying questions, and we have 3 more people to speak. And so I am begging you, please, if you could at least get to the lead sponsors, Councillor Wu and Councillor Arroyo. That'll be 3, 6, 9. That'll be probably 20 more minutes, a little after 4.
Oh, okay.
Okay? All right.
Get close for me.
We're trying.
I understand. Go ahead.
Thank you. Katie? Ms.
Hi,
Crawford?
folks. Thank you, Chair. My name is Cade Crockford. I am the Director of the Technology for Liberty program at the ACLU of Massachusetts. Chair Edwards, members of the committee, and members of the City Council, thank you all for the opportunity to speak on this crucial issue today. We are obviously in the midst of a massive social upheaval as people across Boston and the nation demand that we ensure Black Lives Matter by shifting our budget priorities away from policing and incarceration and towards government programs that lift people up instead of holding them back. And people are outraged because for too long, police departments have been armed to the teeth and equipped with military-style surveillance technologies like the ones that Michael just referenced, even as our schools lack the most basic needs, like functioning water fountains, nurses, and counselors. And even now, during this pandemic, as our healthcare providers lack the PPE they need to protect themselves and us. But our government cannot continue to act as if it is at war with its residents, waging counterinsurgency surveillance and control operations, particularly in Black and brown neighborhoods and against Black and brown people. We must act. We must not merely speak to change our laws, to ensure we are building a free, just, and equitable future for all people in Boston. So that said, banning face surveillance in Boston is a no-brainer. It is one small but vital piece of this larger necessary transformation. Face surveillance is dangerous when it works and when it doesn't. Banning this technology in Boston now is not an academic issue. Indeed, the city already uses technology that with one mere software upgrade could blanket Boston in the kind of dystopian surveillance currently practiced by authoritarian regimes in China and Russia, and as Joy said, even some cities right here in the United States. Boston has to strike a different path by protecting privacy, racial justice, and First Amendment rights. We must ban this technology now before it creeps into our government in the shadows with no democratic control or oversight, as it has in countless other cities across the country and across the world. So today, you already heard from pretty much the world-renowned expert on racial and gender bias in facial recognition. Thank you so much, Joy, for being with us today. Your work blazed a trail and showed the world that yes, algorithms can in fact be racist. You also heard from Michael McMillan, a young Boston resident who has experienced firsthand what draconian surveillance with no accountability looks like. Karina Ham from the student immigrant movement spoke to the need to keep face surveillance out of our public schools, where students deserve to be able to learn without fear. You're gonna hear a similar set of sentiments from Eric Berg of the Boston Teachers Union, and shortly, medical doctor and infectious disease expert Joshua Barocas will testify to how this technology in Boston would inevitably undermine trust among the most vulnerable people seeking medical care and help. Obviously, that's the last thing that we need to do, especially during a pandemic. For too long in Boston, city agencies have acquired and deployed invasive surveillance technologies with no public debate, transparency, accountability, or oversight. In most cases, these technologies, which, as Michael said, include drones, but also license plate readers, social media surveillance, video analytics software, and military-style cell phone spying devices, among many others, these were purchased and deployed without the city council's knowledge, let alone approval. We have seen this routine play out over and over and over for years. This is a problem with all surveillance technologies, but it is especially unacceptable with a technology as dangerous and dystopian as face surveillance. It is not an exaggeration to say that face surveillance would, if we allow it, destroy privacy and anonymity in public space. Face surveillance technology, paired with the thousands of networked surveillance cameras already installed throughout the city, would enable any official with access to the system to automatically catalog the movements, habits, and associations of all people at all times, merely with the push of a button. This is technology that would make it trivial for the government to blackmail public officials for seeking substance use treatment, or to identify whistleblowers who are speaking to the Boston Globe, or in its most routine manifestation, to supercharge existing police harassment and surveillance of Black and brown residents merely because of the color of their skin and where they live. Using face recognition tech, the police could very easily take photos or videos of people at any of these Black Lives Matter demonstrations, run those images through a computer program, and automatically populate a list of each person who attended to express their First Amendment rights to demand racial justice. The police could also ask a computer program to automatically populate a list of every person who walked down a specific street on any given morning and share that information with ICE. It could also be used to automatically alert law enforcement whenever a specific person passes by a specific surveillance camera anywhere in the city. And again, there are thousands of these cameras, with more going up each week.
Yes. So I'm so sorry. You're over the 3 minutes, well over the 3 minutes, but and I have 2 more people plus trying to get this. So I'm just letting you know if you could summarize.
All right, I'm almost done. Thank you. Sorry, Chair. So I'll just skip to the end and say, we are at a fork in the road right now. As Joy said, major corporations, including IBM and Google, are now declining to sell this technology, and that's for good reason, because of the real potential for grave human and civil rights abuses. We, the people, if we live in a democracy, need to be in the driver's seat in terms of determining whether we will use these technologies. We can either continue with business as usual, allowing governments to adopt and deploy these technologies unchecked in our communities, our streets, and our schools, or we can take bold action now to press pause on the government's use of this technology, to protect our privacy, and to build a safer, freer future for all of us. So please, I encourage the City Council to join us by supporting this crucial ordinance with your advocacy and with your vote. And I thank you all for your public service.
Thank you very much. Eric Berg, 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll get right to the point in the interest of time. Thank you to the council for taking this up and for allowing this time today. And I'm here to speak today on behalf of the Boston Teachers Union and our over 10,000 members in support of the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston that was presented by Councillors Wu and Arroyo. We strongly oppose the use of this technology in our public schools. Boston's public schools should be safe environments for students to learn, explore their identities and intellects, and play. Face surveillance technology threatens that environment. The technology also threatens the rights of our BTU members, who must be able to go to work without fearing that their every movement, habit, and association will be tracked and cataloged. To our knowledge, this technology is not in use in our schools, but we've already witnessed some experimenting with it, although it was unclear if it was authorized. 2 summers ago, members of the Boston Teachers Union who were working in the summer program contacted the union to let us know that they were being asked to sign in using an app called Tanda with face recognition features. And the central office didn't seem to know about this program, and to this day, we don't know how it came about. While the district quickly stopped using the photo portion of this app and informed the union that all photos have been deleted, this incident is indicative of how easy it is for private security or HR companies to sell a technology to a well-intentioned principal or superintendent who may not have expertise in the tech field. Face surveillance in schools transforms all students and their family members as well as employees into perpetual suspects, where each and every one of their movements can be automatically monitored. The use of this technology in public schools will negatively impact students' ability to explore new ideas, express their creativity, and engage in student dissent, an especially disturbing prospect given the current youth-led protests against police violence. Even worse, as we've heard, the technology is frequently biased and inaccurate, which raises concerns about its use to police students of color. Academic, peer-reviewed studies show face surveillance algorithms are too often racially based, particularly against Black women, with inaccuracy rates up to 35% for that demographic. We know Black and brown students are more likely to be punished for perceived misbehavior. Face surveillance will only perpetuate and reproduce this situation. When used to monitor children, this technology fails in an essential sense because it has difficulty accurately identifying young people as their faces change. Research that tested 5 top-performing commercial off-the-shelf face recognition systems shows there's a negative bias when they're used on children. They perform poorer on children than on adults. That's because these systems are modeled through the use of adult faces, and children look different from adults in such a way they cannot be considered they're simply scaled down versions. On top of this, face surveillance technology regularly misgenders transgender people and will have a harmful impact on transgender young people in our schools. Research shows that automatic gender recognition consistently views gender in a trans-exclusive way and consequently carries disproportionate risk for trans people subject to it. At a time when transgender children are being stripped of their rights at a national level, Boston must protect transgender kids in our schools. Moreover, face surveillance in schools will contribute to the school-to-prison pipeline, threatening children's welfare, educational opportunities, and life trajectories. Already, children from marginalized communities are too often funneled out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. Face surveillance will inevitably increase this pipeline. I'll get right to the end. Finally, face surveillance technology will harm immigrant families. In this political climate, immigrants are already fearful of engagement with public institutions, and face surveillance systems would further chill student and parent participation in immigrant communities in our schools. Boston schools must be welcoming and safe spaces for all families. The City of Boston must take action now to ensure children and BTU workers are not subject to this unfair, biased, and chilling scrutiny. In order to protect young people in our educational community, we must stop face surveillance in schools before it begins. Thank you very much for your attention and your consideration.
Thank you very much. We're getting there very, very close, Commissioner, I promise. Just one more person, then the two people who specifically said they had some questions, we'll go right to them. Counselor. Joshua Barakas.
Yeah, I will read quickly. First of all, thanks for allowing me to testify today regarding this important issue. I should state that the views that I'm expressing today are my own and don't necessarily represent those of my employer. But that said, I'm an infectious disease physician and an addictions researcher here in Boston. As such, I spend a large majority of my time working on solutions to improve the health and well-being of vulnerable populations, including people who are experiencing homelessness, people with substance use disorders. One thing that we know is that stigma and bias are pervasive throughout our community and lead to disparities in care for these populations. These disparities were laid bare and exacerbated by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. While we're all searching for answers on how to best protect ourselves from this virus, I truly fear that the use of facial recognition technology will only serve to exacerbate existing disparities, including those of racial, gender, and socioeconomic. If we use this very nascent and imperfect technology to track individuals, I'm concerned that it will only serve to marginalize people and worsen health outcomes. We've heard about the low accuracy rates. We know about systemic racism as a public health issue that's fueled by stigma, bias, and misinformation. Additionally, Boston provides expansive services for substance use disorders, including methadone treatment. And it's imperative that we ban facial recognition software to ensure that people seeking substance use disorder treatment and mental health care, among other stigmatized health services, may do so privately and without fear. If we allow this on many of our public cameras, it would enable the government to automatically compile lists of people seeking treatment for substance use, mental health, and as I said, other stigmatized health conditions. This would have a chilling effect and make disproportionately affect our most vulnerable populations. I'll stop there and ask that we consider banning this.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to turn it over. I misspoke earlier. The lead sponsor is Michelle Wu, and she mentioned that she has to move along very quickly. So I wanted to, if it's okay, Councillor Arroyo, I'm going to go ahead and go to Councillor Wu real quick for specific questions. You're good?
Yep,
okay.
Absolutely.
Councillor Wu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much, Commissioner, for making the time to be here. We all know how many demands there are on your time, and now we're asking for even more than you had allotted. So very, very grateful that it means a lot that you took the time and are the one at this hearing. I also want to note that you were the one at the hearing in June 2018 as well. So we know that you've been part of this conversation and supportive of this, this general idea for a long time. So just to clarify on some of what you said, you mentioned that you referenced the technology upgrades that some current vendors that BPD works with have for face surveillance. So just to clarify, has BPD upgraded to the next version of that software and we're just choosing not to use the facial recognition components of it, or has the upgrade not been accepted because it includes facial recognition?
To my knowledge, we have not upgraded, but we anticipate that we will have to, but we will not be using any components of facial recognition. And I guess the technology just isn't efficient enough.
Yep, I hear you, I hear you. When do you think that upgrade would likely happen?
No, I will get back to you.
Okay.
And trust me, I want to have a further meeting so I can have my subject matter experts here. The best.
And I'm going to tick through because I'm going to try to get you out of here as quick as possible. So secondly, so you drew a distinction between face surveillance systems and facial recognition technology. So just to clarify, does BPD, we don't use that, you don't own it right now because you haven't done that upgrade. No. But does BPD work with other state or federal entities that have face surveillance or facial recognition technology? Do you ever use the results of that technology on any sort of database?
To answer you more accurately, I would have to find out. I believe the state police does have some form of facial recognition, and maybe the registry too.
Okay, the registry of motor vehicles?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. And so when state police or we'll find out more, potentially BPD works with the RMB to run matches of photos against their database, do you need any sort of warrant or other approval to do that before, or let's say the state agency?
So I used to be part of the Bureau of Investigative Services. To my knowledge, it's only utilized to help assist in photo arrays. So nothing past that.
Okay, could you just clarify what you mean by that? I'm sorry.
So if you're a victim of a crime and we don't have that person under arrest, we do have a potential suspect, you have to pick, you are allowed the opportunity to try to identify the suspect of the crime. And so to be fair, to ensure that no innocent person is selected, you put the suspect's picture along with several other suspects' pictures, up to 7 or more. And then you see if the victim of the crime can pick the suspect out of that photo array.
Okay, and so the RMB uses the face recognition to provide those photos. State police, yes. Okay.
I want to give you an accurate answer. So, again, in our next meeting, you'll have your answer.
Thank you.
Just photo arrays.
Okay. Are you aware of any state or federal regulations that provide any sort of kind of restrictions or reining in guidance when it comes to facial recognition technology or face surveillance systems?
No.
Okay. And so given the absence of guidelines right now at the federal, state, or city level, and the the need to upgrade and the use by state police, for example, are you supportive? We're hearing you loud and clear that you'd like to have further conversation. Are you just want to get on your opinion now? Are you supportive of a city level ban until there are policies in place potentially at other levels, or specifically at the city level to rein in surveillance overall?
Yes, I am. I've been clear for 4 years. We need your input, your guidance, and I thank you to everyone that testified today. I have a team taking notes because I didn't forget that I'm African American and I could be misidentified as well. And I believe that we have one of the most diversified populations in the history of our city. And we do have to be fair to everyone that is a citizen of Boston. We don't want anyone misidentified. And again, we will work with everyone here because this is how we'll be educated.
Yes, we're very grateful for your time. I'm going to cede to the co-sponsor. Thank you.
So actually, is that fine, Chair? All right. One, I just want to thank you, Commissioner, for supporting the facial recognition surveillance ban and for taking the time to be here for the questions. Councillor Wu asked many of them. I have one specific one, which is, has the BPD used facial recognition in the past in any capacity?
No, not to my knowledge. And I will review that, but not to my knowledge at all.
And does BRIC have access to facial recognition technology?
No, not at all. We don't use it. And, I anticipated that question, and we make sure that we're not a part of any, BRIC does not have facial recognition.
Okay, I think every other question that I had for you today was asked by Councillor Wu, and so I just thank you for taking the time to be here and for supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I go, for the record, nothing has changed in my opinion from 4 years ago. Until this technology is 100%, I'm not interested in it. And so,
and even when it is 100%, you committed to a conversation about it.
Absolutely, we discussed that before.
Thank you. You have. Right.
It's not something that you can just implement. It's just, in 21st century policing, it's important that we also get the input from the community that we serve and work in partnership, so we can, of course, have a better quality of life, and that's inclusive of everyone's expectation of privacy.
So before you go, I'm going to do this one call out to the panelists that just spoke, or to any city councilors. One question that you may have for the commissioner that you need to ask. Do any of you have that? To either Joy, Michael, Karina, Cade, Eric, Joshua, or to the other city councilors. I'm trying to be mindful of his time, but I also understand you guys also gave time to be here today as well. And if you wanted to ask him representing BPD a question. I see Julia Mejia's raised her hand. To the panelists though, who just spoke, any questions? I'm gonna go now to my colleagues to ask one question.
Thank you.
So that allows for him to go. Okay, Councilor Mejia.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly thank Commissioner Ross for your time and just your steadfast leadership. But I do have just a quick question before you go. I just need some clarity. Is that you mentioned that you hope to keep this hearing on the topic of the ordinance and find other ways to address issues of police relations. So a lot of people draw the direct link between facial recognition and relationships with the community. Do you see that link? And can you talk about how the police department sees that link? I'm just really curious about how do we build relationships with the community while also thinking about facial recognition? Like, how do you reconcile?
I can answer that. You know, the information I was given before that we were going to discuss many subjects. And so I thank you for limiting to this one, but the only way you increase relationships with the community is to hold hard discussions like this one. You have to listen to the people that you serve, because, you know, everyone throws around the moniker community policing. I believe that's become jaded. And so I've created a Bureau of Community Engagement so that we can have these discussions. And again, I don't forget my history. I haven't forgotten my history. I came on in 1983. And I've gone through a lot of racism. I was in a tough neighborhood growing up, and I didn't forget any of that. And as you alluded to earlier, some of the city councilors, I'm always in the street talking to people. I get a lot of criticism of law enforcement in general, but I believe in, if you want change, be the change, and you can only change with the people. So I am looking forward to further conversation and to listening to testimony on how we can improve our community relations, especially not only during a time of civil unrest, but we're in the middle of a pandemic as well. And so police departments should not be separated from the community. You have to have empathy, sympathy, care, and respect. A lot of people have lost jobs, and we must keep in mind about socioeconomic economics, fairness for employment. A lot of those things directly affect the neighborhoods of color. And I'm glad that we are increasing our diversity in the communities. And we currently have organizations in Boston that directly speak to the people. The Latino Law Enforcement Organization, the Cabo Verde Police Association, the Benevolent Asian Jade Society. Our department is increasing in diversity, and the benefit of that, the benefit of having representation from every neighborhood we serve, is that it will improve relationships. So again, that's why I'm looking forward to a working session, and my team is taking notes, because everybody's testimony is important. Or trust me, people like you that worked hard for everyone's right. I wouldn't be here as the first African-American police commissioner if we didn't have folks that exercise their First Amendment rights.
And Commissioner Gross, I have a clarifying question, and then I just wanted to note this impacts the staying in. So for folks who, Commissioner Gross has alluded to a working session, just to give some clarification for those watching, that is when we actually get down to the language of the ordinance. Yes. And work down to the commas is what I say, and how to do that. And so what Commissioner Gross is asking, that we have that conversation within the next 60 days, which I'm fine with doing that. I'll just check with the lead sponsors. I did want to make sure I understood what in terms of timing is going on with the contract. Is BPD entering into a contract that has this technology? There was a timing issue that I thought was warranting this hearing happening very fast. Maybe the lead sponsors could also answer this question. I was confused. If someone could explain what was the, there's a sense of urgency that I felt that I was meeting, and I'm happy to meet it. Just if someone, either I saw you, Kate, you nodded. Commissioner, if you mind, let me just figure out what this contract issue is, Kate.
Sure. Councillor, I'd be happy to address that. We obtained public records from the city a while back showing that the Boston Police Department has a contract with a company called BriefCam that expired on May 14th. And the contract was for version 4.3 of BriefCam software, which did not include facial surveillance algorithms. The current version of BriefCam's technology does include facial surveillance algorithms. And so one of the reasons that the councilors and the advocacy groups behind this measure were urging you, Chair, to schedule this quickly is so that we could pass this ban fast to ensure that the city does not enter into a contract to upgrade that technology.
Thank you. Commissioner Gross, where are we on this contract?
Yeah, and thank you. That's exactly what I was going to comment. The older version of BriefCam did not have facial recognition. I believe that the newer version does. BriefCam works on the old version on condensing objects, cars, but I will definitely check on that contract because I am not, I don't want any technology that has facial recognition. And that's exactly what we were going to check on. Okay. My answer right now is no at this point. Okay. Because, you know, I just read into testimony, if we obtain technology such as that, I should be speaking to all of you and to, you know, what that entails if we have BriefCam and it has facial recognition. A component of that allows for facial recognition, no. And if we did go into a contract, would I have the ability to show you that portion that does have facial recognition, that can be censored, that is not, excuse me, poor choice of words, that can be excluded. And so I'm not comfortable with that contract until I know more about it. I don't want any part of facial recognition. But thank you very much. As I read into testimony, all the technology that's going forward now in many fields is like, hey, we have facial recognition. And I'm like, not comfortable with that. And so BriefCam, yeah, the old version, we hardly ever used it. And there is discussion on the new version. And I'm not comfortable with the facial recognition component of that.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Kate, for the background and understanding, both of you, and understanding. I felt a sense to move fast, and I'm moving fast, but I was trying to make sure I understood what for.
I really do have to go.
Yes. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you all for your input.
Will there be someone taking notes, or is there someone, I guess Neil from the mayor's office will be taking notes?
Yeah, and I have my own team taking notes right now.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. If it weren't for advocates such as everyone on this Zoom call, I wouldn't be here in this capacity. So thank you.
Thank you very much,
working with everyone. And thank you, everyone. Take care.
Okay. Thank you very much. And so we have still a robust conversation to have amongst ourselves. About the language, about the goals, whether it goes far enough, if anyone opposes this ban. And I want people to understand, if there is someone who disagrees with a lot of us, this will be a respectful conversation, and that person will be welcome to have their opinion and express it as every single one of us has been able to do so. I'm going to continue now. There's a list of folks who have signed up to speak, and I'm going to continue down that list and keep them to no more than 3 minutes. And then we're going to open up. Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Before I go down the list, I know my counselor, my colleagues also may have questions or concerns or may want to voice certain things about the legislation. And I apologize. So I'm just so amped to get to the public testimony. So I'm going to go ahead and go in order of arrival. The two lead sponsors have asked questions already of the commissioner. Did Councillor Wu or Councillor Arroyo have any questions for the panelists that just spoke? If not, I'll move on to my other colleagues.
I'm happy to defer to colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very well. Councillor Arroyo?
The only question I would have, which is more to, I think, Kate from the ACLU, is whether or not she has any idea where we are on that contract. From what I heard from Commissioner Gross, it sounded like he couldn't confirm the timeline for that contract, whether or not it's been signed or not signed, what's going on with that contract. So does any panelist here have any information on whether or not that contract is, what the status of that is?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Arroyo. Regrettably, no. We filed a public records request with the Boston Police Department on May 14th, so that was about a month ago, asking just for one simple document for the existing contract that the Boston Police Department has with BriefCam, and they haven't sent it to us yet. So, and that, you know, we've prodded them multiple times about it, including on Friday saying, you know, it would be a real shame if we had to go to this hearing on Tuesday without this information, and we still haven't received it. So we do not.
Thank you. That's all, Councillor Arroyo? Very well. Councillor Braden?
Thank you. This has been very informative. Very good questions from my colleagues. One question I had was, other agencies, federal agencies, are they using facial recognition? And if they are they sharing that information with our police department? Does anyone know the answer to that question?
I can speak to that. Joy Bolamwini, if you're still on, you may want to speak to some of this too. So the ACLU, we nationwide have been filing FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests with various federal agencies to learn about how the federal government is using this technology and how they're sharing information derived from the technology with state and local law enforcement. We know, for example, that in the city of Boston, the Boston Police Department works closely not only with ICE, which has been the subject of much consternation and debate before this body, but also with the FBI through something called the Joint Terrorism Task Force. The Boston Police Department actually has detectives assigned to that JTTF unit who act as federal agents. So one concern that we have is that even if the city of Boston banned face surveillance technology for city employees, certainly it would be the case that the FBI and other federal agencies would be able to continue to use this technology and likely to share information that comes from it with the Boston Police Department and other city agencies. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that at the city level, which is why the ACLU is also working with partners in Congress to try to address this level at the federal level as well.
Thank you. That answered my question, and thank you for your work on this very important issue. Councillor, Madam Chair, that's all the questions I have for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. Councillor Mejia? Oh, I'm so sorry, Councillor Bach. Thank you, Councillor Braden. Up next is Councillor Bach. I apologize.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Edwards. My question was actually it's for the panelists, whoever wants to jump in. The police commissioner was making a distinction between facial surveillance and facial recognition systems and what we might be banning or not. And I'm just wondering, I don't know the literature in this world well enough to know if that's sort of a strong existing distinction, whether you think this piece of legislation in front of us bans one or the other, whether you think we should be making that distinction. I'd just be curious for anybody to weigh in on that front.
Got it. So when we hear the term facial recognition, oftentimes what it means is not so clear. And so with the way the current bill is written, it actually covers a wide range of different kinds of facial recognition technologies. And I say technologies plural to emphasize we're talking about different things. So for example, you have face recognition, which is about identifying a unique individual. So when we're talking about face surveillance, that is the issue. But you can also have facial analysis that's guessing somebody's gender or somebody's age or other systems that might try to infer your sexuality or your religion. So you can still discriminate even if it's not technically face recognition in the technical sense. So it's important to have a really broad definition. You also have face detection. So if you think about weapon systems where you're just detecting the presence of a face without saying a specific individual, that can still be problematic. You also have companies like Faceception that say we can infer criminality just by looking at your face, your potential to be a pedophile, a murderer. a terrorist. And these are the kinds of systems that companies are attempting to sell law enforcement. So it's crucial that any legislation that is being written has a sufficiently broad definition of a wide range of facial recognition technologies, right, with the plural, so that you don't get a loophole which says, oh, we're doing face identification or face verification, which falls under recognition. So everything we're doing over here doesn't matter, but it does. So thank you so much for that question, because this is an important clarification.
Great, thanks so much. Was there anybody else who wanted to comment on that front? No. Okay, great, thank you. That was really helpful, Joy. Madam Chair, I'm mindful of the public testimony, so that'll be it from me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. Councillor Mejia?
Yes, no, I just thank you again to the panelists and for educating us beforehand and always sharing all of this amazing information and data and research that informs our thinking every day. I am just curious and at the same time a little bit worried about the just kind of like how we can prevent this from ever passing ever. Because it just seems to me that the way it's been positioned is that it's the right now because it's not, you know, accurate. But I'm just curious if you've seen other cities or you know, or just even around the world, or any other incidences where this has kind of slipped under the radar and has passed. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but. Basically, the bottom line is what I'm trying to understand is that here we are standing firm and banning facial recognition. And from what I understand at this point, our commissioners in agreement because of the issue of accuracy, right? Mm-hmm. How can we get ahead of this situation in a way that we can write this ordinance to ensure that regardless of whether or not it is accurate, that we can still protect our residents? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I do, Councillor Mejia, and thank you for that. I can address that quickly. The council can't bind future city councils, right? So I agree with you. I think that this technology is dangerous whether it works or it doesn't. And I think that's why the city of Boston ought to take the step to ban its use in government. I can promise you that as advocates, we will show up to ensure that these protections persist in the city of Boston as long as I'm alive. And I think that's true of many of my friends and colleagues in the advocacy space. But you know, some cities, some states have considered approaches of, for example, passing a moratorium that expires after a few years. We did not choose that route here. In fact, because of our concerns that are, I think, identical to yours, that this, you know, it's our view that we should never want to live in a society where the government can track us through these surveillance cameras by our face wherever we go, or automatically get alerts just because I happen to walk past a camera in a certain neighborhood. That's a kind of surveillance that should never exist in a free society. So we agree that it should be permanently banned.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then the other question that I have is, I know that we're the city council and all of the jurisdiction is all things that deal with the city, but I'm just wondering, what if any examples have you heard of other, like maybe in the private sector that are utilizing or considering to utilize this as a form? Is there anything, any traction or anything that we need to be mindful of happening outside of city government, if you will?
Joy, do you want to speak to some of the commercial applications?
Sure. So I'm so glad you're asking this question, because facial recognition technologies, broadly speaking, are not just in the government realm. So right now, especially with the COVID pandemic, you're starting to see more people make proposals of using facial recognition technologies in different ways. Some that I've seen start to surface are, can we use facial recognition for contactless payments, right? So your face becomes what you pay with. You also have the case of using facial analysis in employment. So there's a company, HireView, that says we will analyze your facial movements and use that to inform hiring decisions. And guess what? We train on the current top performers. So the biases that are already there can be propagated, and you actually might purchase that technology thinking you're trying to remove bias. And so there are many ways in which these technologies might be presented with good intent, but when you look at the ways in which it actually manifests, there are harms, and oftentimes harms that disproportionately fall on marginalized groups. Even in the healthcare system, I was reading research earlier that was talking about ableism when it comes to using some kinds of facial analysis systems within the healthcare context, where it's not working as well for older adults with dementia. So the promises of these technologies really have to be backed up with the claims. And I think the council can actually go further by saying we're not only just talking about government use of facial recognition technologies, but if these technologies impact someone's life in a material way, right? So we're talking about economic opportunity, we're talking about healthcare, that there needs to be oversight or clear restrictions depending on the type of application. But the precautionary principle, press pause, makes sense when this technology is nowhere near there.
Thank you for that. And I'm not sure if I got the gavel, but I do have one more.
You got the.
I was going to ask something for the schools, but I'll wait. Sorry. Thank you so much to you both. Thank you.
Councillor Flaherty. Okay, Councillor Campbell said she was having some spotty issues with her internet. So if she's not here, I'm going to go ahead and go to Councillor O'Malley, who I'm not sure is still on.
I'm here, Madam Chair.
Yep, there we are. There you are,
Thank
Councillor
you.
O'Malley.
Thank you. Yeah, I will be brief because I think it's important to get to the public testimony, but it seems to me that this sounds like a very productive government operations hearing. It sounds to me that obviously there's a lot of support across the board, and it looks as though the commissioner's asking for one more working session, which seems to make sense, and his comments were very positive, so I think this is a good thing. So thank you to the advocates, thank you to my colleagues, particularly the lead sponsors, and the commissioner for his participation this afternoon, and thank you for all the folks whom we will hear from shortly. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Councillor Asante George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do apologize yesterday for taking a call, earlier for taking a call and unmuting myself somehow. I apologize for that. I hope I didn't say anything inappropriate or share any certain secrets. Thank you to the advocates and to the commissioner for being here today, and thank you to the advocates who have met with me over the last, a few months ago, over a period of a few months. Just really learned a lot through our times together, especially from the younger folks. I am interested in some, if there is any information, the commissioner is no longer with us, so perhaps I'll just forward this question to him myself. But my question is around the FBI's evidence standards around facial recognition technology. I wonder if they've released that, and then through the chair to the makers, we had some questions around section B and 2, and perhaps we can discuss this in the working session, or I'll send this to you ahead of time. But it does talk about section B, part 2 reads, quote, nothing in B or 1 shall prohibit Boston or any Boston official from using evidence related to the investigation of a specific crime that may have been generated from face surveillance systems. So we're just wondering, what types of evidence are we allowing from here, and what situations are we trying to accommodate? So just the specific question that we came up with as an office looking through that. So I'll share that with the makers of this ordinance to understand that a little bit better. But if any of the panelists have information on the FBI standards regarding, if they've shared their standards, then that is my question for this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I can answer that quickly, and then Joy may also have an answer. But one of the issues here is that police departments across the country have been using facial recognition to identify people in criminal investigations for decades now, actually, and then not disclosing that information to criminal defendants, which is a due process violation. And it's a serious problem in terms of the integrity of our criminal justice process in the courts and defendants' rights to a fair trial. So the FBI standards that you're referencing, one of the reasons, at least as far as we understand it, and I don't work for the police department, but one of the reasons, as far as we understand it, that police departments have not been disclosing information about these searches to criminal defendants is that there is no nationally agreed upon forensic standard for the use of facial recognition technology in criminal investigations. And so my understanding is police departments and prosecutors fear that if they were to disclose to courts and criminal defendants that this technology was used to identify people in specific investigations, that those cases would basically get thrown out of court because they, the people who performed the analysis would not really be able to testify to their training under any agreed upon national standard for evaluating facial recognition results or using the technology more generally. I can't answer your other question about that exemption. It is meant to address basically wanted posters, because, for example, if the FBI runs facial recognition on an image of a bank robbery suspect and then produces a wanted poster that has that person's name on it and shares it with the Boston Police Department, obviously the BPD is not going to be in a position to ask every single police department in the country, where did you get the name attached to this picture? And so that's what that exemption is meant to address. There have been some concerns from some of our allied organizations that we need to tighten that up with a little more extra language to make clear that that does not allow the BPD to use the RMV's system for facial recognition. And we will be suggesting some language to the committee to that effect.
And just to echo a little bit of what Kate is sharing here, I do want to point out that in April 2019, with the example of the student being misidentified as a terrorist suspect, you had that photo shared. And even though it was incorrect, you have the ramifications of what happens because of the presumption of guilt. And so this is why I especially believe we should also be talking about systems that try to infer criminality using AI systems in any kind of way, because again, the presumption of guilt then adds to the confirmation bias of getting something from a machine.
Great. So I think in the working session, will there be improved language around tightening that piece up? Great.
Yes, we have some suggestions. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Flynn? Wasn't sure if you had any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I know I had a conversation a while back with Eric Berg from the Teachers Union about this subject, and I learned a lot, from listening to the advocates this afternoon. My question is, I know Joy covered it a little bit, but besides for criminal investigations, what are other reasons that the government would want surveillance cameras?
Surveillance cameras, Councillor Flynn, or facial recognition technology specifically?
Both.
Well, my understanding is government agencies, including the Boston Transportation Department, use surveillance cameras for things like traffic analysis, accident reconstruction. So there are non-criminal uses for surveillance cameras. I'm not aware of any non-criminal uses in government, at least, for facial surveillance, except in the, I would say, so-called intelligence realm, right? So that would mean not a criminal investigation, but rather an intelligence investigation, for example, of an activist or, an activist group or a protest or something like that.
Okay. Besides government, what are the purposes of facial recognition that businesses would want? I know they might use it in a store, but what are some of the other reasons private sector might use it?
Sure. So speaking to private sector uses of facial recognition, oftentimes you see it being used for security or securing access to a particular place. So only particular employees can come in. Something that's more alarming that we're seeing with commercial use is the use in housing. And so we have a case even in Brooklyn where you had tenants saying to the landlord, we don't want to enter our homes with our face. don't install facial recognition technology. They actually won that case, but not every group is going to be so successful. So you can be in a situation where your face becomes the key. But when your face is the key and it gets stolen or hacked, you can't just replace it so easily. You might need some plastic surgery. So we see facial recognition technologies being used for access in certain ways. And again, the dangerous use of trying to predict something about somebody. Are you going to be a good employee? You have companies like Amazon saying we can detect fear from your face. And so thinking about how that might be used as well. The other thing we have to consider when we're talking about commercial uses of facial recognition technologies is oftentimes you'll have companies have general purpose facial recognition. So this then means other people can buy it and use it in all kinds of ways. So from your Snapchat filter to putting it for lethal autonomous weapons, you have a major range with what can happen with these sorts of technologies.
Pardon me, Councillor, I would just jump in to also reiterate that this ordinance only applies to government conduct. It would not restrict in any way any entity in the private sector from using this technology. But that said, you know, some other uses, I don't know if you've ever seen the film Minority Report, but in that film, Tom Cruise enters a mall and, you know, some technology says to him, "Hello, sir, how did you like the size small underwear you bought last time?" So that's actually now becoming a reality as well, that in the commercial space at stores for marketing purposes, we are likely going to see, if laws do not stop this from happening, the application of facial surveillance in a marketing and commercial context to basically try to get us to buy more stuff.
And to underscore that point, you have a patent from Facebook, which basically Facebook has so many of our face prints. We've been training their systems for years, right? The patent says, given that we have this information, we can provide you background details about somebody entering your store, and even give them a trustworthiness score to restrict access to certain products. This is a patent that has been filed by Facebook. So it's certainly within the realm of what companies are exploring to do. And you already have companies that use facial recognition technologies to assess demographics. You have cameras that can be put into shelves. You have cameras that can be put into mannequins. So you already have this going on. In Tacoma and Washington, they even implemented a system where you had to be face checked before you could walk into a convenience store. So this technology is already out there.
Well, thank you. I know my time is up. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation because I have a couple more questions, but I'll ask them at another time. But again, thank you to the advocates and thank you to Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. It's between me and public testimony. So I'm going to just put my 3 questions out there. And then we're going to go right down the list of folks who have signed up and RSVP'd again. And to those folks who are going to come after you've testified, again, we're maxed out in our limit of people who could participate. So if you're willing to testify and then also sign out and watch through YouTube or watch through another mechanisms to allow somebody else to testify, that would be very helpful to this process. I'm looking specifically at the issue of enforcement in this statute or in this ordinance, and it says no evidence derived therefrom may be received in evidence in proceeding or before any department or officer, agency, regulatory body. I want to be clear, if the police receive this evidence, could a prosecutor use it in court?
So
that's my question.
Okay, sorry.
So that's my issue. There seems to be no actual evidence prohibition for use in court against somebody. The other issue or concern I have is violations of this ordinance by a city employee shall result in consequences that may include retraining, suspension, termination, but they're all subject to provisions of collective bargaining agreements. So all of that could be gone away if their union hasn't agreed to that being part of the disciplinary steps for that particular employee. So to me, that signals the patrolmen and other unions of folks who are part of investigating need to need to have this as part of a violation of contract or violation of standard. I think, maybe I'm wrong. And then finally, Joy, your testimony about the private sector has really hit me. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm particularly concerned about this. I'm a twin. Facebook tags my sister in all of my pictures automatically, right? So, I'm a twin. Councillor Saba George has triplets, so for those, we're called multiples. You are all singletons. You were born by yourself. We share birth, multiples have, And so naturally, I'm concerned about this. Not that my sister is inclined to do any criminal activity, but she may go to a protest or two. I don't know. But either way, the point is, I'm concerned about the private actor and how they interact. And I'm particularly concerned is how far this will go down the line, the supply chain, right? Because we have $600 million in contracts for all sorts of things for the city of Boston. If we have a contract with a cleaning company that requires the workers to sign in with facial recognition, right? So how far down the line can we go with our money? Now, I understand time is of the essence, and that might be a big, big question that we can work out in the working session. I'm particularly concerned about the courts. So if you want to just focus on that one,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So just very quickly, we are unclear on what the City Council's power is to control the prosecutor's office, right? So I think we'll look more into that. We'll look closely at that. On the second question, I agree. We need to look at the BPPA agreement, which I understand expires this summer.
BPPA.
And then BPPA, yeah. And then finally, on the private sector concerns, I share them. Again, we want to get this government ban passed as quickly as possible. The ACLU supports approaches like that the state of Illinois has taken. They passed the nation's strongest consumer-facing biometrics privacy law. It's called the Biometric Information Privacy Act, BIPA. BIPA essentially prevents any private companies from collecting your biometric data without your opt-in consent. And that's not, I clicked a button when I was scrolling through a terms of service. It's you actually have to sign a piece of paper and give it to them. So we need a law like that right here in Massachusetts.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to public testimony. I have some folks who have already committed and asked to speak today. I'm going to go through them. It's already 4:45. I'm going to try and end this hearing no later than 6, so that's an hour and 15 minutes to move through public testimony. And I'm going to have to keep folks to 2 minutes, as I said before, because there are a lot of people signed up. So of the folks who've signed up, I will go through that list. Then I'm going to invite people to raise their hands who may not have signed up directly, who would also like to testify. All right, so I have on the list Bonnie Tinerello from the National Lawyers Guild. After her, I have Kaylin Bignoli from the Library Freedom Project and Maddie Cropley. Those are the 3 folks signed up. Let's see. Kaylin, is there Bonnie? Okay, well, I see Kaylin right now ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Kaylin. If you want to start, your 2 minutes has begun.
Sure. Hi, I am Kaylin Bignoli. I'm a resident of West Roxbury and a librarian in the Boston area. And I am speaking on behalf of the Library Freedom Project today. So thank you to the chair and thank you to all of City Council for the chance to testify today in this important piece of legislation. So the Library Freedom Project is a library advocacy group that trains library workers to advocate and educate their library community about privacy and surveillance. We include dozens of library workers from the US, Canada, and Mexico, including 8 librarians from Massachusetts. These library workers educate their colleagues and library users about surveillance by creating library programs, union initiatives, workshops, and other resources that inform and agitate for change. And facial recognition technology represents a class of technology that is antithetical to the values of privacy and confidentiality of library workers. As library staff, we understand that part of our work is to represent these values and the services and resources we provide to our library community in order to reduce the harm of state and corporate scrutiny. As we understand this, we can see the social and economic imperatives that privilege some and marginalize others that are encoded into many computer systems and applications. This is a result of the structure of our technology industry, which prioritizes the interests of management, venture capitalists, and stockholders, who are mostly white men. The racial and gender biases inherent in face surveillance technology are indicative of those values and they describe how moneyed interests seek to shape or reinforce racist and gendered oppressions by creating computer systems that extend the reach of profiling through the exercise of capital. Democratic, direct worker, and community control over the development, acquisition, and practices of surveillance and surveillance technology is an urgent priority to protect safety and privacy in our neighborhoods and schools. So the Library Freedom Project supports this urgently necessary ordinance to ban facial recognition technology in Boston for the safety and privacy of those who work in the city and who live here. We urge the council to wrest control over surveillance.
2 minutes is up. 2 minutes is up, so if you want to summarize.
I have one more sentence. We cannot allow Boston to adopt authoritarian, unregulated, and biased surveillance technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Bonnie, I don't know if Bonnie's available. If not, I see Maddie is available. So I'm going to go ahead and start your 2 minutes, Maddie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And thank you to the City Council and all the panelists for taking up this important issue. My name is Maddie Cropley. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a teen librarian and a bargaining unit member of the Boston Public Library Professional Staff Association, MSLA Local 4928 AFT. Our union of library workers supports a ban on facial recognition in Boston. In voting to do so, our union recognizes that facial recognition and other forms of biometric surveillance are a threat to the civil liberties and safety of our colleagues and of library users. Our library ethics of privacy and intellectual freedom are incompatible with this invasive technology. We recognize that facial recognition and other biometric surveillance technologies are proven to be riddled with racist, ableist, and gendered algorithmic biases. These systems routinely misidentify people of color, which can result in needless contact with law enforcement and other scrutiny, essentially automating racial profiling. We recognize the harm of surveillance for youth in our city, especially Black, brown, and immigrant youth. Unregulated scrutiny by authorities leads to early contact with law enforcement, resulting in disenfranchisement, marginalized futures, and potential death by state violence. We recognize that public areas such as libraries, parks, and sidewalks exist as spaces in which people should be free to move, speak, think, inquire, perform, protest, and assemble freely without the intense scrutiny of unregulated surveillance by law enforcement. Public spaces exist to extend our rights and provide space for the performance of our civil liberties, not policing. A ban on face surveillance technology is critically important for residents and visitors to the city of Boston. Our union encourages you to ban the use of face surveillance in the city of Boston by supporting and passing this very crucial ordinance. I'd like to thank you for your time, and we are the Boston Public Library Professional Staff Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I understand that Ms. Bonnie is available. She's under a name Linda Ridzewski. So we're gonna pull her up. I'll check when she's available. Up after her will be the following three testifiers: Nikhil Thorat, Noor Suleiman, and Professor Woodrow Hartzog. So first, Bonnie. She's under Linda Ridzewski. Sorry. All right. Linda Ridzewski is, I see.
I am so sorry. I've had technical problems. This is Bonnie Tenorello on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild. And I had to sign in with my office account, and I am not representing Prisoners Legal Services, and I couldn't change the screen name once I was signed in. Am I audible to everyone?
You're on, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So I'm speaking on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild Massachusetts chapter, which has over 80 years has fought for human rights, and we're deeply concerned over the dangers of facial surveillance. We strongly support this ordinance. Facial recognition deployed through cameras throughout a city can be used to track the movements of dissidents and anyone attending a protest, as others have observed. Our history in the National Lawyers Guild shows that this danger is real. We have defended political dissidents targeted by law enforcement, such as members of the Black Panther Party, American Indian Movement, Puerto Rican Independence Movement, and more recently here in Boston, Occupy Boston, climate change activists, those opposing a straight pride event, and Black Lives Matter. We know that the dangers of political surveillance and political use of this technology are real. The National Lawyers Guild also helped expose illegal surveillance in the Church Commission 1975-76 COINTELPRO hearings. We know from this experience that this can be used to disrupt and prosecute political protest. People must be able to demonstrate without fear of being identified and tracked afterwards. I will not repeat what others have said very articulately about just the basic privacy concerns of being able to walk through a city without having cameras track your identity and movements throughout the city, nor will I repeat the excellent testimony that was given about the racial bias in this technology. But on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild, I will say that we cannot tolerate a technology that perpetuates racism in law enforcement as tens of thousands of people take to the streets calling for racial justice. We're at a historical moment when our society is demanding, and this council is considering, a shift away from control and policing of communities of color and low-income communities, and towards community-directed programs that channel resources to jobs, healthcare, education, and other programs that create true safety.
Yeah.
So we reject facial surveillance, and we urge the council to pass this ordinance.
Thank you very much. So up next we have Nikhil Dora. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No problem, you got that right. So thank you, Chair, and to the amazing speakers before me. My name is Nikhil. I work at Google Brain in Cambridge. So I specifically work in the area of machine learning fairness and interpretability. So this is sort of the stuff that we do. So I'm here as a citizen, and I am very much in favor of the ordinance banning facial recognition by public officials here in Boston. So modern AI algorithms are statistical machines, right? They base predictions off patterns and data sets that they're trained on. There's no magic here. So any bias that stems from how a data set is collected, like non-representative collection of data for different races because of historical context, gets automatically reflected in the AI model's predictions. So what this means is that it manifests as unequal errors between subgroups like race or gender. And now this is not theoretical, it's been studied very deeply by many AI researchers in this field who have been on this call. There's a federal NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology study that looks at almost 200 facial recognition algorithms and found significant demographic disparities in most of them. And there's another paper by Joy here, Gender Shades, that looked at 3 commercial classification systems and found that there are 35% of the time incorrect results for dark-skinned females versus only 0.8% incorrect for light-skinned males. This is horrible, right? So these mistakes, can't also be viewed in isolation. They will perpetuate bias issues by informing the collection of the next generation of data sets, which are then again used to train the next generation of AI models. Moreover, when mistakes are made either by a machine or by a human being, we need to be able to ask the question, why was that mistake made? And we simply haven't developed robust tools to be able to hold these algorithms to an acceptable level of transparency to answer any of these critical questions. Deployment of these systems will exacerbate the issues of racial bias in policing and accelerate the very social inequalities that we're protesting today. Innocent people will be targeted. The threshold for deploying these systems to be extremely high, one that's arguably not reachable. Beyond accuracy, beyond this 100% accuracy idea, data would have to be public and there would have to be actionable algorithmic oversight. This is an incredibly high bar, and we are nowhere near that, both algorithmically and societally. Along with this ordinance, we must start laying the groundwork for rigorous criteria for future technology, as it is an inevitable conversation. But first, we must pass the ordinance banning facial recognition in Boston. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Following Nikhil, we have Noor Suleiman. Sorry again for mispronunciation.
It's all good. Thank you, council members and authors of the ordinance for your service to the city. My name is Noor Suleiman Langendorfer, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a resident of Jamaica Plain, and I'm here in my capacity as a private citizen. I won't repeat what everyone else said, but I will say that the use of facial recognition by law enforcement today is especially disturbing due to the epidemic of police violence in this country, and the dysfunctional relationship it has with Black and brown people in the city. And with all due respect, I am unconvinced by the distinction made between facial surveillance and facial recognition. I'm even more disturbed, or I am disturbed that the commissioner does not know if the police department uses facial recognition software. I asked the council to consider supporting that the ordinance establish a total ban on the use of facial recognition software in all public spaces, including by law enforcement, malls and shopping centers, retail spaces, restaurants open to the public, state government buildings, courts, public schools, schools funded by the state, on public streets, and in places of employment as a condition of employment and as a condition of landlords leasing rental properties. The ban should also apply to the use and purchase of facial recognition software by any state agency operating in Boston, including law enforcement. And I further urge the council to consider adopting a ban on the use of private DNA databases by law enforcement and all remote surveillance systems, including those that recognize individual gaits. Information gathered through the aforementioned technologies should not be deemed admissible in civil, criminal, or administrative proceedings, or serve as a basis for granting a search warrant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I have a Professor Woodrow Hartzell. Okay, 2 minutes.
It's me. Thank you so much. Dear councilors, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of the ordinance banning face surveillance in Boston. I am a professor of law and computer science at Northeastern University who has been researching and writing about the risks of facial recognition technologies for over 7 years. I make these comments in my personal academic capacity. I am not serving as an advocate for any particular organization. Please allow me to be direct. Facial recognition technology is the most dangerous surveillance tool ever invented. It poses substantial threats to civil liberties, privacy, and democratic accountability. Quite simply, the world has never seen anything like it. Traditional legal rules, such as requiring legal process or people's consent before surveillance can be conducted, will only entrench these systems, lead to a more watched society where we are all treated as suspects all the time. Anything less than a ban will inevitably lead to unacceptable abuse of the massive power bestowed by these systems. That is why I believe that this ordinance is justified and necessary. There are many ways that law enforcement's use of facial recognition technology can harm people. Government surveillance has disproportionately targeted marginalized communities, specifically people of color. Facial recognition will only make this worse because it is inaccurate and biased based along racial and gender lines. And while facial recognition is unacceptable when it's biased and error-prone, the more accurate it becomes, the more oppressive it will get. Accurate systems will be more heavily used and invested in, further endangering the people of Boston. Use of facial recognition seems likely to create a pervasive atmosphere of chill. These tools make it easier to engage in surveillance, which means that more surveillance can and will occur. The mere prospect of a hyper-surveilled society could routinely prevent citizens from engaging in First Amendment protected activities, such as protesting and worshiping for fear of ending up on government watch lists. Facial recognition also poses a threat to our ideals of due process because it makes it all too easy for governments to excessively enforce minor infractions as pretext for secretly monitoring and retaliating against our citizens who are often targeted for speaking up, like journalists, whistleblowers, and activists. The net result would be anxious and oppressed citizens who are denied fundamental opportunities and rights. For the reasons outlined above, I strongly support the ordinance banning facial surveillance in Boston. It's the best approach for preventing an Orwellian future and ensuring that the city of Boston remain a place where people can flourish and civil liberties remain protected.
Thank you so much, Professor. We have coming up Alex Matthews, Emily Reif, Jarrell LaRona. Those three folks, I don't know if they're ready to go, but we'll start. I see Jarrell, I see Alex. We'll go ahead, Alex Matthews.
Hi.
2 minutes.
I don't wish to echo what other excellent advocates have been saying, but I'm here representing Digital Fourth, Restore the Fourth Boston, which is a volunteer-based advocacy group on surveillance and policing issues in the Boston area. And I want to highlight some comments of Commissioner Grass in addition to our testimony. Commissioner Grass seems to recognize the racial biases and limitations of this technology as it stands now, but he says it's improving and he holds out hope that it will be more accurate in the future and that perhaps at some future point the Boston City Council should reconsider whether it will be appropriate to implement facial recognition technology. The problem with this is that a 100% accurate facial recognition technology system would be terrifying. It would represent the death of our anonymity in public. In terms of the effect of facial recognition technology on legislators themselves, there have been a number of studies now that show that current facial recognition technologies are perfectly capable of misidentifying legislators as criminals. And these systems being 100% accurate will pose even more worrying risks about that. As city councillors, where are you going when you're going in public? Are you meeting with social justice groups? Are you meeting with immigrant advocates? Are you meeting with, God forbid, police reform and accountability groups? Are you doing something embarrassing, perhaps, that could be used to influence your votes on matters of public interest or on matters relating to the police budget? The risks of these things happening are very real if it is to be implemented in the future, and the only appropriate response is for today's City Council to ban this technology.
Thank you very much. I believe, I don't know if Emily is available, but I do see Jarrell. Jarrell, would you like to go?
How you doing?
2
Can you hear me?
Yeah. 2 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Boston City Council, for having this platform. I thank you. Thank you, and shout out to the expert advocates on the subject for shedding light on the subject that, me and many of us are not, fully versed in. What I am well versed in, though, is the reality surrounding the Boston Police Department's history and the negative impact that they have had on the Black and brown Bostonians for decades. My name is Jarrell LaRona. I'm a formerly incarcerated Black man from a heavily policed Commerce Square neighborhood of Dorchester. I'm a community organizer for Families for Justice's Healing, and I'm here to support in the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston, presented by Councillors Wu and Arroyo. First, what are we talking about? We are talking about a force whose actions and racial profiling techniques have been documented, tried in court, and notoriously known for targeting and terrorizing, those from disinvested communities, right? We're talking about militarization, to intimidate, force their will on Black and brown citizens of the Commonwealth. A force by their own field interrogations and observation records show almost 70% of them were Black residents in a city that's only around 25.2% Black. So we're talking about taking the same force and further funding them and equipping them with another weapon that would definitely be used to further oppress, target, and incarcerate our sons and fathers and daughters and mothers. My organization is currently supporting the appeals and release efforts of Black men and their families who have been incarcerated since the 70s due to racist profiling and racist misidentification. When I think about racial recognition software, which at best is predatory and inaccurate, I don't see a solution and I don't see safety. I see yet another form of racial bias and another way of police to cause harm in my community. Today, our city's historical racial profiling issue with, somebody said it earlier, with the federal government study that, the algorithm, my fault, failed to identify, people of color, right? And children and elderly and women. So, I see that it needs to be banned because we can't continue condoning and reassuring and fueling, other generations of Black and brown men and women from Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan, to more trauma, right? And more incarceration. Investment in our communities through community-led processes is the only thing that we need, not facial recognition tech. Oh, this bee's messing with me. Sorry about that. No matter what level that technology reaches. And thank you. That's all I have to say. I'm gonna keep it quick.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. And I think it's, again, when people speak from the heart about their own experience and specifically talk about how it would impact them, I do appreciate that. Not that I don't appreciate the experts, but I'm telling you, there's nothing better than hearing about how residents are directly impacted. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have also on the list, Cynthia Pages. I don't have a name, but I have an organization called For the People Boston. I don't think we have either one. There is, I see a Marco Staminovic. Is Marco ready to go? Marco?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? All right, thank you. Thank you to the council and the panelists for allowing me to speak. So I'm a machine learning engineer working in an adjacent field and a resident of Jamaica Plain. And I'm here today as a private citizen. So this is my first time speaking at a public hearing, so cut me some slack. So although I'm not an expert on the surveillance aspect and the applications, I am familiar with the technology aspect of this stuff. So I felt the need to testify today because of the gravity of this issue. Although the technology may seem benign upon first glance, this is an extremely powerful and dangerous tool. So to me, this amounts to basically a form of digital stop and frisk. And it's even more dangerous since it can be kind of constantly running, constantly working anywhere at all times, kind of tracking folks. This seems like a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment to me. As many commenters and panelists today have noted, in addition, as many folks have noted today, the technology is certainly not perfect, and it's riddled with biases based on the data that it was trained on and how it was trained and by the folks that trained it. And although this is an important thing to note, this should really be a moot point when evaluating these technologies for deployment, right? Because while a poorly functioning system is bad and introduces issues, a perfectly functioning system would be much, much worse and would basically signal a world where we could be tracked out of hand at any time the police or government wanted. So that's really what I wanted to say, and I wanted to kind of state my support for a ban on any type of facial recognition technology for use by the police or the government. and that we should disincentivize the research and development of, send clear signal to disincentivize the research and development of these types of systems in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. It's perfect on time for the first time participating. We really appreciate it. I hope that this is not your last time. We are dealing with a lot of different issues. Your voice is definitely welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, I have, I'm going to name Will Luckman, followed by Lizette Medina, and then also a Nathan Sheard. I apologize again if I mispronounce your name. Feel free to just state your name again. For folks who've already testified, again, since we're over capacity, if you sign out and then watch from YouTube, that allows for someone else to get in line to also speak. So just letting you know that's what we're trying to do. So I will now turn it over to, I believe Will is ready to go, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Will Luckman, and I serve as an organizer with the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, or STOP. And STOP advocates and litigates to fight discriminatory surveillance. Thank you, councilors, for holding this hearing today and for proposing this crucial reform. Today, my oral remarks are an excerpt of written testimony being entered into the record. Facial recognition is biased, broken, and when it works, antithetical to a democratic society. And crucially, without this ban, more people of color will be wrongly stopped by the police at a moment when the dangers of police encounters have never been clearer. The technology that drives facial recognition is far more subjective than many realize. Artificial intelligence is the aggregation of countless human decisions codified into algorithms. And as a result, human bias can infect AI systems, including those that supposedly recognize faces in countless ways. For example, if a security camera learns who is suspicious looking using pictures of inmates, the photos will teach the AI to replicate the mass incarceration of African American men. In this way, AI can learn to be just like us, exacerbating structural discrimination against marginalized communities. As we've heard, even if facial recognition worked without errors, even if it had no bias, the technology would still remain antithetical to everything the city of Boston believes in. Facial recognition manufacturers are trying to create a system that allows everyone to be tracked at every moment in perpetuity. Go to a protest, the system knows. Go to a health facility, it keeps a record. Suddenly, Bostonians lose the freedom of movement that is essential to an open society. If the city fails to act soon, it will only become harder to enact reforms. Companies are pressuring local, state, and federal agencies to adopt facial recognition tools. BriefCam, the software powering Boston's surveillance camera network, has released a new version of their software that would easily integrate invasive facial recognition tools. Although the commissioner says he will reevaluate the new version on offer, he also expressed interest in waiting until the accuracy of the technology improves or making exceptions for facial recognition use right now. To definitively and permanently avoid the issues with facial recognition that I've raised here, we need comprehensive ban now. And I'll conclude on a personal note. I live and work in New York City, but I was born in Boston and raised in Brookline. It pains me to see the current wave of protests roiling the area because it demonstrates the biased and unequal law enforcement practices I remember from my youth have yet to be addressed. I know that the people of the Commonwealth want to see a change, and I believe that the council is on their side. In practice, inaccuracies aside, facial recognition systems lead to increased stops for people of color. Increased stops mean an increase in opportunity for police violence and abuse. We must recognize that Black Lives Matter, and to do so, we must realize that technology doesn't operate in a neutral vacuum. Instead, it takes on the character of those building and deploying it. I encourage the council to respond to their constituents' demands for police reform by immediately banning the use of this harmful technology in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. Lizette Medina.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lizette Medina. I'm here as a private citizen. I actually am pretty new to all of this. I, this week, have found out from the student immigration movement kind of what's going on. And I just wanted to voice my support for this ban. I think personally as an immigrant, it's speaking toward like the presence of facial recognition technology in the school system. I think especially where we have so many conversations with like the school to prison pipeline, this tool could be used to facilitate that kind of work in racially profiling and profiling our students. And I think now more than ever, we have this, at this point in time, a decision to make in protecting our residents of color, Black and Brown residents and students as they live and try to navigate the various systems that are already putting pressure on them. And so I think, especially in light of recent events, this is really a stand to support residents of color in Boston over possible pros that could be looked at in this. And I also think it's troubling that the commissioner doesn't seem to be clear about what's kind of going on with this. In addition, that it also isn't clear that there is even a surveillance of whether or not this could be used already, that kind of thing. So I think, one, I'm just so thankful that this conversation is being had, that this is open to the public, and that I just wanted to voice my concern for this being a tool for racial profiling and my support in the ban. Thank you.
Very much. Next is Nathan Sheard. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. You have 2 minutes, Nathan. Go ahead.
No, you said it perfectly. Thank you. So my name is Nathan Sheard, and thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and our 30,000 members. The Electronic Frontier Foundation strongly supports legislation that bans government agencies and employees from using face surveillance technology. We thank the sponsors of this ordinance for their attention to this critical issue. Face surveillance is profoundly dangerous for many reasons. First, in tracking our faces, a unique marker that we cannot change. It invades our privacy. Second, government use of the technology in public places will chill people from engaging First Amendment protected activity. Research shows and courts have long recognized that government surveillance of First Amendment activity has a deterrent effect. Third, surveillance technologies have an unfair, disparate impact against people of color, immigrants, and other vulnerable populations. Watch lists are frequently over-inclusive, error-riddled, and used in conjunction with powerful mathematical algorithms which often amplify bias. Thus, face surveillance is so dangerous that governments must not use it at all. We support the aims of this ordinance and respectfully seek 3 amendments to ensure that the bill will appropriately protect the rights of Boston residents. First, the bill has an exemption for evidence generated by face surveillance that relates to investigation of crime. EFF respectfully asks that it be amended to prohibit the use of face surveillance-enabled evidence generated by or at the request of the Boston Police Department or any Boston official. Second, the private right of action does not provide fee shifting for a prevailing plaintiff. Without such fee shifting, the only private enforcers will be advocacy organizations and wealthy individuals. EFF respectfully asks that language be included to award reasonable attorney fees to a prevailing plaintiff. Third, the ban extends to private sector use of face surveillance conducted with a government permit. The better approach, as Kate has offered earlier, is to use face surveillance to make sure that face surveillance is used only with informed opt-in consent. Thus, EFF respectfully requests that the language be limited to prohibiting private sector permitting for the use of face surveillance recognition at the government's request. In closing, EFF once again thanks the sponsors, looks forward to seeing an ordinance passed that bans government use of face surveillance in Boston, and will enthusiastically support the ordinance banning face recognition technology in Boston if it is amended in these ways. Thank you.
Nathan, I just want to make sure I took notes on your suggested amendments. And I want to make sure you had 3, which is to ban the use by the BPD, no exemptions, period. 2, that currently, because enforcement doesn't allow for fee shifting or attorney fees, it really does put it on either individuals to take it on their own without having any kind of, private actor or support that helps to be funded. And then 3, to extend to private actors essentially down the supply chain where the city of Boston can tell private actors that contract with us. Because I don't know, one of the questions, and I'm only saying this, is one of the issues is how far we can go. I mean, we can't regulate Facebook, but we can regulate where money goes. So I'm assuming it's spot that.
Yeah. So to reiterate, so the first amendment that we would suggest is that right now there's an exclusion for evidence, and Kate spoke earlier to the fact that that's in reference to, if they receive something from the federal government, a wanted poster or what have you. But to make sure that it's amended to tighten that up a bit and say that as long as that information isn't requested or created at the request of the Boston Police Department. So that's the first one. The second one is the fee shifting, so that it's not just the EFFs and the ACLUs and wealthy individuals that have the power to make sure that it's enforced, right? So folks can find attorneys to support them because the attorneys will be compensated for that time. And finally, on the third, and I think that this speaks to your greater question. Right now, it prohibits the offering of a permit to a private company, agency, person, what have you. Whereas we would tighten it up to say that a permit could be provided as long as it wasn't being provided for face surveillance to be collected at the behest or at the request of the Boston Police Department. So really making sure that, we're speaking back to the fact that private use would be better protected by something similar to the Biometric Information Privacy Act in Illinois that requires informed opt-in consent from the individual, rather than simply saying that no private actor can use face surveillance.
Thank you. That was a great clarification. I'm going to go now to our next speakers. Thank you very much. I have in line Sabrina Barroso, Ismelda Heredia, Cristina Vasquez. So if we have.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much. Just to let folks know, Christina is not with us. Some folks had to leave because they have to work. Hi, everyone. Hi, City Councilors. My name is Sabrina Barroso. I am the lead organizer for the Student Immigrant Movement, the first undocumented immigrant youth-led organization in the state of Massachusetts. We believe that all young people are powerful and that when youth are supported and have space and investment to grow, they flourish into the leaders of today and tomorrow. At SIM, we are invested in protecting and working on behalf of the undocumented youth and families of Massachusetts. That's why I'm here with you all today, and I would like to make clear that we must prohibit the use of facial recognition technology and software in the city of Boston. For far too long, the Boston Police Department has been allowed to have full flexibility and free will over how they police and surveil our communities, and the consequences are devastating. Our people are being criminalized and funneled into prisons, detention, and deportation. We need full community control over the police, and this is a key move to bringing power to our people. Right now, there are no laws that control what the BPD can purchase for surveillance or how they use it. And when I learned this, I was scared because I thought about the history between the BPD and families like mine. And I thought about the people who are about the people that I love and that the people I care about. And I thought about the people who are constantly harassed and targeted by law enforcement simply for existing. So if you ask me, facial recognition is not to be trusted in the hands of law enforcement that tracks, monitors, hyper-surveils Black, brown communities, and that puts immigrants and activists, youth, under constant scrutiny and criminalization. Councilors, would you really trust a police department that shares information to ICE, that shares student information to ICE as well, that has led to the deportation of students, that exchange emails saying happy hunting with ICE? And that has historically targeted Black and brown youth to invade their personal space, their bodies, and their privacy with stop and frisk. That is not ashamed to separate youth from their families from their communities and then end up pinning injustices and crimes on us. The BPD says that they don't use facial surveillance now, but they have access to it, and they have a $414 million budget to buy it. Right now, our communities need access to funding for healthcare, housing, and so many other things, and the list goes on. For years, residents of Boston have been demanding to fund things that truly matter to them, and we have to invest in things that are not face surveillance, that doesn't even work and is irrelevant to keeping our communities safe. We must invest in intentional restorative justice practices, healthcare, mental health, and resources to prevent violence and distress. Facial surveillance would end privacy as we know it and completely throw off the balance and power between people and their government. Listen to youth and listen to our community, and let's follow the lead of young people who are addressing the deeper issue of what is to criminalize our people and putting the power in the hands of the people, especially when it comes to governing surveillance. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. And you had said Christina is not available, Sabrina?
Yeah, she's not available.
Okay. Is Melda?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hi, my name is Smelda, and I am a member of the student immigrant movement. Today, I'm here to testify in support of the banning facial recognition technology in Boston. This will establish a ban of government use of face surveillance in the city of Boston. Boston must pass this ordinance to join Springfield, Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, and Northampton in protecting racial justice and freedom of speech. A federal government study published in December 2019 found that face recognition algorithms were much more likely to fail when attempted to identify the faces of people of color, children, the elderly, and women. That means that technology only reliably works on middle-aged white men, a very small fraction of Boston's residents. As a young person in the city of Boston, it is clear to me that this type of technology is not okay to use in our communities. The fact that this technology is used to control specifically in communities of color makes my family and me feel unsafe, as well as the other families that live within these communities. Black and brown kids at a young age are put in databases that are used against them without awareness or reason. This interrupts their education, limits our future. Kids shouldn't be criminalized or feel unsafe. Black and brown kids should be able to walk on the street without the fear or fear of knowing what's going to happen. This shows how this surveillance is used to target Black and brown communities to racial profiling, and technology is one of the many forms of systematic racism. Immigrant youth in the city do not trust the police because we know that they are very close with ICE. We know that they sent student information to ICE, and this has led to the deportation of young people in pain in our communities. Black and brown communities are constantly under surveillance. BPD cameras will facilitate their stream surveillance and criminalization of us. It is not right. Everyone on the council at some point has talked about supporting young people and young people being our future leaders. We are leaders right now. We are telling you to do what everyone knows is right. Prohibit the use of facial recognition surveillance. We can do more to protect immigrant families in Boston. Stop selling youth and families out. Let's give power to people and take this first step in addressing the problem we have with law enforcement surveillance and criminalization of people for simple existence.
Thank you very much. Next up, the next group of folks we have are Sherlandi Perdue, Eli Harmon, have Natalie Diaz and Jose Gomez. So Sherlandi available? I think I see the person in the waiting room, Carrie. This is Sherlandi. Well, we'll go ahead and go to Eli, who I think I see right now, ready to go, and then we'll come back to Sherlandi. Eli, you have 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Who's speaking?
Oh, sorry, this is Eli.
Okay, very well.
Thank you so much. My name is Eli Harmon. I live in Mission Hill. I've been doing work with the student immigrant movement. I'm testifying on behalf of them today in support of the ordinance. The issue of police surveillance is enormously important to people all across the city of Boston, though it's of particular concern to communities of color, which it overwhelmingly targets. A study done by MIT Research showed this type of surveillance technology to be far less accurate for people of color, and in fact, it was inaccurate for 35% of Black women and was most accurate for white adult men. Law enforcement today already, of course, overwhelmingly targets Black and brown communities, and this type of technology is likely to only make this more so the case. Additionally, this type of technology is a complete violation of people's privacy. There are no regulations with regard to the extent to which law enforcement can use this technology, and it has been used as an abuse of power by government officials in order to track down immigrants, people of color, and activists. Finally, lots of money goes into funding this surveillance technology, and for the reasons previously stated, this technology in no way keeps our communities safe, and the money that currently funds it could be put into much better places, such as creating affordable housing for all, fully funding the Boston Public Schools, creating equitable healthcare, and other places which would actually be effective in bringing down crime rates. Many cities that neighbor Boston, including Somerville, Brookline, Cambridge, and Springfield, have chosen to ban facial surveillance because they understand that it is dangerous and harmful to communities of color. It is a violation of people's privacy, and that money currently being used to fund that technology would be better spent in places that actually improve lives in Boston. For these reasons, I ask the council to pass a prohibition of the use of facial recognition surveillance and give the community control over surveillance technology and usage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I do see Sherlandi.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you have 2 minutes, Sherlandi.
Okay. Dear
Go ahead.
City Councilors, I am writing on behalf of SIM in support of the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston. I urge my city of Boston to pass this ordinance to join other cities in Massachusetts like Springfield, Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, and Northampton in putting the community power before the police. The city of Boston, the residents, families, and youth of Boston deserve transparency, respect, and control. A ban on face surveillance technology is important in the city of Boston because this technology is dangerous and it leads to serious mistrust in the community. Face surveillance is proven to be less accurate for people of darker skin. Black people already face extreme levels of police violence and harassment. The racial bias and face surveillance will put lives in danger. But even if accurate, we should still be doing all that we can to avoid a future where every time we go to the doctor, a place of worship, a protest, the government is scanning our face and recording our movements. We already know that law enforcement is constantly sharing and misusing information. What would happen to our people when we are already under constant surveillance and criminalization? Using face surveillance, the government could begin to identify and keep a list of every person at a protest. People who are driving or who are walking the street every single day across the city on an ongoing automatic basis. It would keep the same harmful surveillance going like what happened with the use of gang database. It would criminalize anyone anyone who make a move in our city. If we want this city to be safe, we need to put our money where our mouth is and invest in practice such as restorative justice to help restore our community. Facial surveillance is not the answer. If anything, it is distracting or addressing our real concern about safety in our communities. I urge you to prohibit the use of facial surveillance in the city of Boston because we cannot allow law enforcement to target Black and Brown immigrants, activists, and community members. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to all of the youth who have testified and will testify at SIM, all those folks showing up. I just want to say thank you so much on behalf of the City Council. You're our future and you're doing an amazing job. I have Nathalie Diaz and then Jose Gomez. I see that Emily Reef, who had signed up before, might also be available. So those next three names, I think Nathalie may no longer be with us. Okay, is Jose available?
Yes.
2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm here on behalf of SIM to testify in favor of the ban of facial recognition software in Boston. I am an MIT alum working as a software engineer in Boston, and I'm a Docket recipient as well. And I want to tell you firsthand that as a software engineer working in AI and machine learning enabled robots, that the software used for facial recognition is far from perfect. In fact, as Joy found and others have noted, 1 in 3 Black women is likely to be misclassified by technology, and our own federal government has found that the face recognition algorithms were more likely to fail when attempting to identify faces of people of color, children, elderly, and women. The software, after all, is written by people and is inherently filled with mistakes and bias, despite the detailed quality assurance processes all production-level software undergoes. This is an accepted fact in the software industry. No matter how good your software is or the testing process is, bugs in the software will always exist. Consequently, The use of facial recognition technology by government entities, especially the police departments, must be banned as the consequences of errors in this technology are of life and death. A false identification by facial recognition software could lead to an unwarranted confrontation with the police department. This seemingly small error in facial recognition software may not mean much to you, but as an undocumented immigrant and a person of color, any confrontation with the police could mean deportation or even my life. The police have a record of systemic racial bias leading to the deaths of thousands of people. Government entities, especially police forces, do not need any more tools to further their racial bias, and consequently their systemic murdering of the very people they're meant to protect. I encourage you to press pause on the use of face surveillance by government entities in the city of Boston by supporting this crucial ban. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. After Jose, I think we had, let's see, after Jose, we had, Emily Reef has rejoined us. She was part of the original first set we called. Emily?
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, 2 minutes.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. I was having internet issues. Yeah, so my name is Emily Reif, and I work on a machine learning research group at Google, although of course my views are my own, and I'm here as a citizen. Yeah, I strongly support the ban on facial recognition technology, and many people have said similar things too. What I'm about to say in much better words, I just wanted to, yeah, just reiterate. Even when working correctly, there are so many major privacy concerns with these technologies, and by definition, they're designed to track us wherever and whenever we're in public spaces, and to aggregate this information. And having this kind of extreme surveillance is not only kind of horrifying at a personal level, but it will also fundamentally change the way that we go about our daily lives and operate as a democratic society. And others have already cited some of the research on this. It's a well-documented phenomenon, not a good one. And so that's all about facial recognition technology when it's working perfectly. But again, as people have noted, that's so far from the truth. Yeah, there's a ton of research on this by the ACLU, Timnit Gebru, and Joy, who spoke earlier. And I've seen this in my own research. Our team's research is related to this area that these models are just totally not reliable for data that is different than what they're trained on. And that these inaccuracies don't make it any less dangerous. I mean, one might say like, oh, so it makes it, potentially less dangerous, but it makes it much, much more dangerous when the inaccuracies just reinforce the biases the disparities that have always been there in the way that different groups are surveyed and policed and incarcerated. And we saw with Breonna Taylor's death that, thinking that you're attacking or that you're entering the right house, and if you are wrong about that, I mean, there's just horrible, unspeakable consequences. And yeah, that's just, we can't possibly risk that. And that's not a road we should remotely think about going down. Thank you.
Yeah, that's perfectly on time. I'm just going to go down the list and also call on Christian DeLeon, Clara Ruiz, Diani Serrano, and Oliver DeLeon. Those folks are available. I see Christian DeLeon. Kristen, you may start. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Christian DeLeon.
You may have to turn off if you're on a computer and on your phone or something, you're going to have to turn off one of the devices.
Can you hear me fine now?
Much better. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christian DeLeon, and I'm here today as a member of the student immigrant movement in support of banning facial recognition in Boston. Face surveillance is not only a huge invasion of privacy, but in the wrong hands can be used to even further oppress minorities. It can be used to track immigrants, protesters, and inaccurate when tracking people of darker complexion. As we know, this can be very problematic since these tools target these communities through racial profiling already. Having surveillance tools like facial recognition will contribute to an even greater systemic oppression. This also has no business being in our schools. To my knowledge, some schools are already investing in face recognition software and are investing millions in this new technology. And for what exactly? To track their students' every move. I believe schools should spend that time and money on bettering their school and education systems rather than spending it on software and tools that will in no way improve students' ability to be educated. We are already living in a time where technology can do scary things, and the last thing we need are people watching our every move on a day-to-day basis. During this pandemic, we have grown accustomed to wearing masks and covering our faces in public. Well, if we now have facial recognition on every street corner, then this temporary thing the world has adapted to may just become permanent. Not only to protect our own privacy, but to not be falsely accused of crimes due to falsely recognition software. 2020 has had a great display of racism and brutality against people of color, particularly the Black community, and I fear that systems such as facial recognition software in the hands of law enforcement can just be another tool they use against us. Thank you for listening to my concerns.
Thank you very much. Clara Ruiz?
Hello.
Hello, you have 2 minutes, Clara.
Thank you so much. My name is Clara. I'm a student leader, and I'm writing in support of the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston, presented by Councillor Wood and Arroyo. This ordinance established a ban on government use of face surveillance in the city of Boston. Boston must pass this ordinance to join Springfield, Somerville, Cambridge, Brooklyn, and Northampton in protecting racial justice, privacy, and freedom of speech. This mattered to me because I'm a member of the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color community, and this is allowing for the community to increase in racial biases. This technology does not protect constitutional rights and values, including privacy and anonymity, free speech and association, equal protection, and government accountability and transparency. And the government must be aware of the technical limits of even the most promising new technologies and the risk of relying on computer systems that can be prone to error. Facial recognition is creeping into more and more law enforcement agencies with little notice or oversight, and there are practically no laws regulating this invasive surveillance technology. Meanwhile, ongoing technical limitations to the accuracy of facial recognition create serious problems like misidentification and public safety risks. I refuse to sit back and let you put my community at more risk than it already is. The surveillance technologies are intentionally set up to the disadvantage of brown and colored people communities. It has a better success rate when it comes to white males, meaning this technology is unreliable and it will do more harm if we don't ban the surveillance tool. This technology will allow for misidentification to purposely happen against Black and brown people. A ban on face surveillance technology is critically important in the city of Boston because we need to keep the community safe because all life matters. A federal government study published in December 2019 found that face recognition algorithms were much likely to fail when attempting to identify the faces of people of color, children, elderly, and women. That means the test only reliable works on middle-aged white men. A very small fraction of Boston residents. I encourage you to press pause on the use of face surveillance by government entities in the city of Boston by supporting and passing this crucial ban. We cannot allow Boston to adopt authoritarian or regulated bias of surveillance technology. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. And by the way, Diana Yves Serrano is also going to be testifying through this soon.
Diana, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Diana Yves Serrano. Good evening. I'm writing on behalf of SIM in support of the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston. I urge my city of Boston to pass this ordinance to join Springfield, Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, and Northampton in protecting racial justice, privacy, and freedom of speech. It is our duty as a free and just city to ban technology like facial recognition. As a victim of social media hacking, I've seen how technology could be used as a tool to defame and criminalize with pictures that feel like proof to the viewers. As a teacher, aunt, and civilian, I've refused to allow those in my community to be exposed to a highly problematic technology like facial recognition. Not only is privacy important and should be valued by our law enforcement, face surveillance is proven to be less accurate for people with darker skin. With the high levels of racial discrimination forced on our Black and brown communities by law enforcement, the racial bias in face surveillance will put lives in danger even further than they already are. A ban on face surveillance technology is critically important in the city of Boston because the technology really is only reliable for a very small fraction of the population. It's highly important to me to live in a city where it is critical for our leaders to keep our city and its people safe. Although it may seem as though facial recognition could maybe keep us safer, it has proven to do the opposite. I urge you to press pause on the use of facial surveillance by government entities in the city of Boston by supporting and passing the crucial ban. We cannot allow Boston to adopt authoritarian, unregulated, biased surveillance technology. Thank you for your attention. Diana Becerrano.
Thank you very much. Oliver De Leon. You have 2 minutes.
Hi. My name is Oliver, and I live in Jamaica Plain. And I was undocumented when I attended the Boston Public Schools in the early 90s. So yes, it's a while back. As I became a citizen in 2016, I look back on my days in high school while contemplating this new technology that's, facial recognition. And I can sincerely tell you that it terrified me, the thought of having somebody access this technology without my consent acknowledged. I don't know if this would have allowed me to finish school at that time, and it would have been hard to even finish possibly higher education. Without that education, I wouldn't have been able to secure job opportunities like I have now with a paying job that helps me provide for my family. So we start thinking about that, and we can start seeing how this facial recognition can actually have a negative impact in the education of our youth and our future. People already talk how the U.S. is already riddled with racial bias, and this software is just giving people already empowered the tool to discriminate even more. For example, ICE has already shown up in the protests and detained a few people. Now we have to ask ourselves, how the heck did they pick out these few people in the thousands of sea of protesters? I mean, one can only speculate, but one of the few answers can be facial recognition software. Do we not have it? Do they have it? How can we be sure that they're not using it? Well, it's pretty hard to pick out 2 or 3 individuals out of thousands and thousands and thousands of protesters. So it's up to us to kind of speculate what that is. The coronavirus has caused major epidemic. The police brutality has caused major epidemic. I guess we have to ask ourselves, are you allowing the next epidemic to happen? Maybe. Facial recognition in the city of Boston will bring us to be in the middle of the next battle. And which side do we want to be on? Let's not approve this software. I urge you to ban facial recognition technology as it also affects our youth. We do not need a system or software that can pick up individuals and potentially erroneously, accuse them of something that they haven't done. Will the next death be caused by your choice today? Let's hope not. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's 10 to 6. I'm going to have to stop chairing at 6 o'clock. That only means that I will be turning over the gavel to one of the lead sponsors, Michelle Wu, at 6 o'clock. But I'm going to call the next names of individuals who are in line and have signed up to speak before I go, and I will continue chair. I have an Angel, Michelle Rajman, Leon Smith, Amy Vanderheil, Julie McNulty, and Zachary Lone. Is the Angel available?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes, Angel.
My name is Angel, and I am in first grade and go to a Boston public school. I am 7 years old. To me, surveillance means people watching you without even knowing. I would feel frustrated because I do not want anyone watching me, especially if I'm home, at school, or at a park. Facial recognition is when they see your face and know all the details, but this does not work for everyone because most police do not like people who are not their skin color. This tool is not going to be equal to people who are Black, Latino, immigrants, and more. It can get the wrong person. I am young. As I get older, I will not look the same. I am 7 now, and when I turn 13, I will look different. When I turn 18, I will look different. I get older and my face changes. If these tools are used in school, I will not feel safe. We are just children. Our teachers are already taking care and watching us. We do not need police watching us. Thank you, Sim, for your love and support.
Well, I have to say, I think you're the youngest person that's testified ever in anything I've ever chaired or had that participation. I know we're all on Zoom, but I will give you a round of applause. Thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful and very powerful testimony. We're so proud of you. Your city council and city are so proud of you. Thank you so much for your testimony, Angel. I'm going to now call on, I don't think I see Michelle or Leon. I don't hear them either. Okay, so I see Amy, who was we called earlier. So Amy, you have 2 minutes and you get to follow the cutest 7-year-old ever. Go ahead. You're on mute.
Thank you. I applaud her testimony entirely. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and the Council, for hearing our testimony. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say my name's Amy Vanderhill. I live in Rosendale, and I support the ban on face surveillance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle, I have a Michelle Rajman, and I see that Michelle Barrios. Are you the, okay, that was a mistake. Very well then, Michelle, you have 2 minutes.
That's okay. Rasmus is my maiden name, and I also am not. I'm following Angel is a bit much. So, hello, my name is Michelle Barrios, and I am a social studies teacher in the Boston area. And today I am here speaking on behalf of the student immigrant movement, myself as an educator, and on the behalf of my diverse student population. I am speaking in support of the ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston, presented by Councillors Wu and Arroyo. This ordinance established a ban on government use of facial surveillance in the city of Boston. Boston must pass this ordinance to join Springfield, Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, and Northampton in protecting racial justice, privacy, and freedom of speech. In my training as a social studies teacher, I became increasingly aware of the trauma that students of color develop as they grow in a society that seeks to police them on the basis of their ethnicity, economic status, and place of residence. This trauma is exacerbated when a young person comes from an immigrant family whose status in this country places them at risk of family separation, a loss of education, and a stripping of basic human rights. We know that students struggle to succeed academically when they face these daily existential traumas, which in essence is a violation of their rights in the US to pursue survival, let alone social mobility and a future of stability. In addition to my training and work as an educator, I am the wife of a Latino immigrant and the mother of 2 mestizo children. While I am a white Latina and I can live under the presumption of innocence due to my white privilege, I have witnessed firsthand what it means to live in a society that has not yet made good on its promise of equality, liberty, and justice for all. My husband is followed in stores. Teachers hesitate to release our children to him when they first meet him, and he has been asked for his immigration status by customers in his place of work. We are in the fortunate position to know that his life and our family can count on his permanent residency to keep us together for now. However, I cannot say the same for many Latinx families in the greater Boston area. A ban on face surveillance technology is critically important in the city of Boston because the surveillance harms our privacy and our freedom of speech, a fundamental right in our republic's constitution. This type of surveillance threatens to create a world where people are watched and identified as they exercise their right to protest, congregate at places of worship, and visit medical providers as they go about their daily lives. For my students of color, specifically the young men growing up in a world that still cannot fully accept that their lives matter, face surveillance technology is not only another threat to their lives, but a response saying to these young people, you still don't matter. I teach world history as well as comparative government and politics, and when I teach about authoritarianism, I teach about the impact on marginalized groups and countries that are still considered developing. I teach that in these free countries, or in these recently free countries, surveillance is one of the most common tools to manage dissent, and that is often followed by state-sanctioned violence as a means to silence any dissidents. I urge each of you to consider the statement that you make to the public by not banning the use of the statement that you would make by not banning the use of facial surveillance technology in Boston. I urge each of you to imagine a 14-year-old student of color or a Latino essential worker in front of you asking if their lives matter. What is your response? I encourage you to consider that moment and to press pause on the use of face surveillance by government entities in the city of Boston by supporting and passing this crucial ban. We cannot allow Boston to adopt authoritarian, unregulated bias surveillance technology. Thank you for your attention and your consideration.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to turn over the microphone or the gavel, if you will, to my colleague, Michelle Wu. I'll just say up next, two speakers should be getting ready is Julie McNulty, Zachary Lone, Christina Rivera, and Joseph Friedman. I want to say thank you so much to the lead sponsors of this ordinance. I will be planning to have a working session as soon as possible. I do understand the urgency, and I do believe that there's a great opportunity before us to lead in a way that we that not only values the lives of our Black and Brown, but in general our civil liberties. And so I want to thank again the lead sponsors for their leadership. I look forward to getting this done. And with that, I am going to have to sign off, and I turn over to Michelle Wu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. We're very grateful for you. Okay, next up was Julie. And if not Julie, then Zachary. And just a note, could Council Central staff give me administrative rights so I can help search the whether folks are stuck in the waiting room and transfer people over into the panelist section? Thank you. So again, it was Julie, Zachary, Christina Rivera, Joseph Friedman, Danielle Samter are the next few. Christina, why don't you go ahead? I see you now in the main room.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me. As stated, my name is Christina Rivera, and I am an East Boston resident. I'm also the founder of the Latinx Coalition for Black Lives Matter. It is a support organization to help end racism within our community, but also help advance the work of the Black Black Lives Matter movement. I want to say that we as an organization, we fully support the ordinance of a ban on facial recognition technology. As stated all throughout this meeting earlier, we know that the automation bias exists and that facial recognition technology clearly shows bias towards already highly targeted and hyper-policed communities, specifically those of color. And I just want to pose the question, how can we begin to trust, even with the development of algorithm accuracy, that those who will use it in the future will not abuse its capabilities? We already have a police force that has shown time and time again that some of their own procedures are still abused to this date and used by bad actors. So adding a tool that can be used to further affirm racial bias only provides another route to target our communities. Using this technology also enforces a policing system that is based on control, and that is a direct symptom of police mistrust that already exists of their own citizens and the ones that they serve. And so as some people earlier stated, specifically Mr. De Leon's point about what government agencies are allowed to already use this versus people who have enacted bans, what is also going to be the legislative power that any federal agency will be able to use it in individual states, specifically when it comes to ICE and immigration. So this is something that we are looking to make sure that it not only is banned now, but also cannot be allowed in the future. With that said, thank you so much to all the panelists who've shared all this great information. Thank you so much to Councillor Wu and Councillor Arroyo for doing this work. And I concede my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. We appreciate you. Joseph?
Yes, thank you for your time. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the science between emotion detection technologies. So these are technologies that use information captured from face surveillance to supposedly recognize emotions. So I'll be speaking to you as a private citizen, but I'll tell you that for the past 3 years, I've been working at a lab at Northeastern University which studies emotions, and I've been a research assistant at the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Relations, thinking about the same type of technology. At the Interdisciplinary Affective Science Lab at Northeastern, one of my bosses is Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. Dr. Barrett has research appointments at MGH and Harvard Medical School. She's the Chief Scientific Officer at MGH's Center for Law, Brain, and Behavior. She's the author on over 230 peer-reviewed scientific papers and just finished a term as president of the Association for Psychological Science, where she represented tens of thousands of scientists around the world. 3 years ago, this organization commissioned her and 4 other experts, psychologists, computer science, and so on, to do a major study on whether people across the world express emotions like anger, sadness, fear, disgust, surprise, and happiness with distinctive movements of the face. So all of these scientists started with different perspectives, but they reviewed 1,000 research articles and they came to a very simple and very important consensus. So the question is, can you read emotions reliably in a human face? And the answer is no. Here's an example from Dr. Barrett. People living in Western cultures scowl when they're angry about 30% of the time. This means that they make other facial expressions, frowns, wide-eyed gasps, smiles, about 70% of the time. This is called low reliability. People scowl when angry more than chance, but they also scowl when they're not angry, if they're concentrating or if they have something like gas. This is called low specificity. So a scowl is not the expression of anger, but it's one of many expressions of anger, and sometimes it doesn't express anger at all. In this paper, Dr. Barrett and her colleagues showed that scowling in anger, smiling in happiness, frowning in sadness, these are all Western stereotypes of emotional expressions. They reflect some common beliefs about emotional expressions, but these beliefs don't correspond to how people actually move their faces in real life, and they don't generalize to cultures that are different from ours. So it's not possible for anyone or anything to read an emotion on our face, and we shouldn't confidently infer happiness from a smile, anger from a scowl, or sadness from a frown. There are technologies that claim to do this, and they're misrepresenting what they can do according to the best available evidence. People aren't moving their faces randomly, but there's a lot of variation, and the meaning of a facial movement depends on a person, on the context, and on culture. So let me give you one example of how making this assumption can be really harmful. There's a scientist, Dr. Lauren Rue, when she was at Wake Forest University, published work reviewing 2 popular emotion detection algorithms. She ran these algorithms on portraits of white and black NBA players, and both of them consistently interpreted the black players as having more negative emotions than the white players. Imagine that there's a security guard that gets information from a surveillance camera that there's a possible nuisance in the lobby of their building because of the facial movements that somebody's making. Imagine a defendant in the courtroom that's scowling as they concentrate on legal proceedings, but an emotion AI, based on facial surveillance, tells the jury that the defendant is angry. Imagine that the defendant is Black and the AI says that they're contemptuous. Imagine, at worst, a police officer receiving an alert from a body camera based on this technology that says that someone in their line of sight is a threat based on a so-called reading of their face. Counselors, I think that the question that we should be thinking about is whether we want someone to use this technology on us with the chance that it would misinterpret our face, given the major chance that it has of being wrong. And I think the clear answer to that is no. We should ban facial surveillance technologies and all of these other dangerous applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Danielle, and Danielle will be followed by DJ Hatfield and Denise Horn.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danielle. I'm a Boston resident. I live in the North End. I just wanted to fully support and put my voice behind the ban for facial recognition technology. I feel as though the expert witnesses and activists that have gone before me have clearly expressed and eloquently expressed the views that I also share. I find this technology to be incredibly dangerous. As a cybersecurity professional, I have a lot of questions about how, what it means to be collecting data on people and storing it. I certainly think that this is a measure that should be taken to be a precedent for all future developments of the technology. As was just stated, there are upcoming and new ways to express facial recognition, either through emotions or otherwise, that we can't even comprehend yet because it hasn't started. So I just wanted to support it and thank all the other people for putting their voice behind it and hope to see it take place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. DJ?
Mute myself. Hi, I will start the video. So I'm DJ Hatfield. I'm a professor of anthropology and history at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. However, what I have to say is, as a private citizen and a resident of East Boston, shout out to Lydia, East Boston pride. Yes, as an anthropologist, I'm aware that all technologies, including digital technologies, reflect and augment the social structures and systems of value of particular societies. They are not objective, but reflect the biases of those societies as they develop through history. Moreover, if we look at societies where facial recognition has been widely deployed, such as the People's Republic of China, we see very clearly how these technologies have been used systematically to target marginal populations. This is a quality of the way that these technologies intersect with social systems that act against people of color and indigenous people globally. Therefore, in the city of Boston, where we take pride in our civic freedoms, we should be wary of technologies that would make our Fourth Amendment meaningless and would erode the First Amendment. Therefore, I would urge the City Council and the City of Boston to pass a complete ban on facial recognition systems and technology with the amendments that have been proposed by experts, such as those of the Electronic Freedom Foundation, the Algorithmic Justice League, who have said there should be no exception for the Boston Police Department to use facial recognition or surveillance systems in evidence, in which there should be strict rules for enforcement of breaches of this ban. And finally, if possible, extending this ban to all private actors who have business in the city of Boston. Thank you for your consideration and thank you for all of your time today. I appreciate being able to join in my very first public hearing.
Thank you. We are excited to have you at our hearing and hope you'll come back. Denise next, and then after Denise, there are a few names signed up that I didn't see in the room, so I'm gonna call out the folks that I was able to cross-reference between the waiting room and the list, which was Charles Griswold and Nora Paul Schultz. And then after that, I'm going to try to admit everyone else who's in the room and go in order even if you weren't on the original list. So Denise, please.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the council and the lead sponsors of the ordinance, and the panelists for the excellent commentary. And I just have to say how impressed I am with the student immigrant movement for showing up today. That's really impressive. My name is Denise Horn. I'm a resident of Jamaica Plain. I'm also a professor of political science and international relations at Simmons University, although I'm not representing my institution today. And I want to say that I support the ban against the use of facial surveillance. So like Professor Hatfield, I am a scholar of international relations, have studied authoritarian regimes in Eastern Europe and East and Southeast Asia, where surveillance technologies of every kind have been and are used to target enemies of the state. In the United States, we're already seeing this language in use by the leaders in our government regarding immigrants and activists, and especially those who are opposed to fascism. I do not think that we should underestimate how this type of technology could be used to further racist and authoritarian agendas here. The use of facial surveillance is used to oppress and control citizens under the guise of public safety. This is a slippery slope. Government surveillance is used to silence, to suppress speech, and to violate human rights. As an educator, I worry about how this type of technology will be used to adversely affect the lives of my students of color, trans students, undocumented students, activists, and marginalized groups. Their lives matter. I strongly support this ban, and I thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Denise. Charles?
Yep. So trying to start the video here. There we are. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Charles Griswold. I'm a resident of Brighton, and I'm a philosophy professor at Boston University. I hasten to add that I'm offering my thoughts here, and in offering my thoughts, I am not speaking for my university and not acting on his behalf. So I'm speaking on my own behalf only. I'm very grateful to all of you on the council for taking action on this matter, and to the police commissioner for his impressive and in some ways reassuring testimony. It's imperative, I think, that you approve this ban on facial recognition technology, or rather technologies, as we've learned today, by government before the relevant software is upgraded. So far as I can tell, 3 basic arguments for the ban have been discussed today, the first 2 extensively and the third a bit less so, and taken together, they seem to me to be decisive in making the case for the ban. The first is, of course, the matter of racial and gender justice on account of the fact that the technology is known to be inaccurate. But secondly, is the fact that the technology is objectionable, not just because it's not accurate, but also when it is accurate, as Cade Crockford has eloquently argued today. And that seems to me to be an essential part of the response to the commissioner's remarks. In sum, the technology puts tremendous additional power in the hands of government and its agents, all the more so when it actually does work. And our privacy, among other things, is certainly threatened by that. Where could that lead? Look no further, as people have suggested, to the nightmare that is the surveillance apparatus in China today. The third point is, has been mentioned, but was less emphasized, and I think it's just worth underlining, which is that the awareness of being personally tracked outside of one's home by this technology can, and I think will have a chilling effect on our exercise of our civil rights, including our rights of free speech, freedom of association, and of religion. So I strongly urge the council to pass this ban, but I also ask that you not stop there. Expand the ban even further going forward to include other kinds of remote surveillance systems such that are biometric, for example, gait and voice recognition systems, and also to the private sector has been suggested. So I hope that you will consider expeditiously passing this, but also going further. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. Nora?
Good evening. My name is Nora Paul Schultz, and I am a physics teacher in Boston Public Schools. And I've had the pleasure of teaching Eli and Ismelda, who spoke earlier, and hopefully one day Angel. And I'm a resident of Jamaica Plain. As someone who studied engineering when I was in college, has taught engineering, and is one of the robotics coaches at the O'Brien, I understand the impulse to feel like technology can solve all of our problems. I know that for many, there is a desire that if we have better, smarter, and more technology, then our communities will be safer. But the reality is that technology is not perfect, a biased tool as much as we wish it would be. Our technologies reflect the inherent biases of our makers, so technology isn't going to save us. If it does not take much to see that racism is infused in all parts of our country, and that is true about the facial surveillance technologies. Through my work with Unafraid Educators, the Boston Teacher Union's Immigrant Rights Organizing Committee, on the information sharing between Boston School Police and the Boston Police Department, I know how detrimental observations and surveillance can be. Practices of surveillance like camera recording in the hallway or officers watching young people are not passive. Surveillance is active. It leads to the creation of law enforcement profiles about young people, and that can impact their lives in material ways for years to come. And what are those impacts? Being in the system can make it harder for young people to get a job or get housing. It can lead to incarceration. It can lead to deportation. Our city government does not need more tools to profile the people of our city, and especially doesn't need tools that are inherently racist. This is why the ban is so important. Teaching has taught me that what keeps us safe is not having the government surveil us and track us through technology. What keeps us safe is investing in housing, education, and healthcare. This face surveillance technology harms our community. This face surveillance technology harms our community. The fact that the face band technology only identifies Black women correctly 1/3 of the time lays bare both the ineffectiveness and the implicit bias built into the system. As a teacher, I know that that is not a passing grade. We need money to go to services that will protect our community, and we need to stop and prevent the use of ineffective, racist, and money-wasting technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora, and we appreciate all of your work. I'm going to quickly read the list of names that were signed up to testify, but I didn't see matches of the names of folks left in the waiting room. So just in case you're signed in on a different name, but I'm expecting that these folks probably aren't here anymore. Julie McNulty, Zachary Lown, McKenna Kavanaugh, Christine Doherty, Sarah Nelson, Andrew Terrio, Amanda Meehan, Chris Ferrone, Bridget Shepard, Lena Papagiannis. Anyone here and signed on under a different name? Nope. Okay, then I will just go in the order of folks appearing on my screen to close this out. Thank you so much for your patience. So that will be Mark G, then Adeline Ansel, then Carolina Pena.
Yes, this is Mark Gurvich. I'm presenting testimony on behalf of Jewish Voice for Peace, a local and national organization that's guided by Jewish values, fighting racism, sexism, Islamophobia, LGBTQ oppression, and anti-immigrant policies here, and challenging racism, colonialism, and oppression everywhere, with a focus on the injustices suffered by Palestinians under Israeli occupation and control. In recent days in the US, we have again witnessed the impact of militarized policing on communities of color. Councillor Wu has pointed out in a recent publication about this militarization. And much of this militarization has been through the transfer of billions of dollars worth of equipment from the military to civilian police forces, and the training of US police in the use of military tactics in controlling the communities most heavily impacted by racism, economic depletion, and health crises. Our view is that the use of facial recognition technology is a key component of the militarization of policing. We know this because of our knowledge and experience of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian people and land. Facial recognition is a core feature of that occupation. Much of the technology being marketed to the U.S. law enforcement has been field tested on Palestinians under military occupation. At this historic and critical time when the effects of militarized policing in the U.S. has resulted in nationwide and worldwide condemnation, the very last thing we need is another tool adopted from the toolbox of military occupation. Jewish Voice for Peace supports the face surveillance ban. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adeline or Adeline, sorry to mispronounce your name. Adeline Ansel. Okay, we'll move on to Carolina or Carolina Pena. Let me see, I will unmute on my end in case it's a muting and unmuting issue. No, okay, then we'll move on to Kristen Lyman. Kristen will be followed by Galen Bunting, Maria Brinker, and Araya Razak. Kristen? Okay, going to Galen. Maria Brinker.
Yes. Hi. I had actually not necessarily prepared.
Hello?
Statement. Can you hear me?
Adeline, we'll go to you right next after Maria now. Sorry about the confusion.
Okay.
No problem. So I just wanted to thank everybody, and I want to say that I am very much. So I'm an associate professor at UMass Boston, and both as an educator, as a researcher in issues of surveillance, I am very much in favor of the ordinance. I would like to say that I would also like the council to consider wider regulations. So as many have said before, there is a lot of issues also in the private sphere. So this is a very important first step. But a lot of the use of facial recognition in law enforcement really interacts with the use of surveillance technologies in the private space. So for example, when the Brookline Police Department were trying to argue against the Brookline ban, they used an example of police using Snapchat. So a lot of people before, a lot of speakers have talked about the importance of anonymity in public space, and I'm fully in support of that. But this is not only about public space. So the use of facial recognition software is of course invading all our private spaces as well. So I would like people to be aware of that. And as a teacher right now with the epidemic, teaching on Zoom, you can only imagine the deployment of voice and face recognition in all our spaces. And so I think this is very important. And another thing, my background is also in philosophy of neuroscience and in the understanding of autonomous action. And our autonomous action depends on being in a space that we can understand. And one of the reasons why facial recognition is one of the most dangerous inventions is that it precisely ruins the integrity of any space we're in, because we don't know who's there. And it can do so retroactively. So I thank you very much for all your work on this, and I'm fully in support of the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, next we'll go to Adeline. Adeline, sorry.
Hi, I'm Adeline Ansel. I
I was just coming out to support the ordinance as a member of the Unafraid Educators group of the Boston Teachers Union to protect our immigrant students and who have been advocating for themselves through the student immigrant movement to support this ordinance banning facial recognition technology because it puts our students more so at risk. And I don't have a lot to add. I just want to support the work they're doing and their student advocacy. I know they all spoke for themselves and their allies did as well. And just wanted to let you know that Boston teachers also support this ban. So thank you for listening to all of their testimony and know that their teachers are on their side too and that we support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last call, either Carolina or Galen or anyone else who would like to speak. I think everyone's been admitted from the waiting room now. Okay, seeing no takers, I'll pass it back if any counselors wish to make a closing statement before we wrap up. I'll save Councillor Arroyo for right before we close. Councillor Anissa Sabi-George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, at this point, and thank you to you and Councillor Arroyo for bringing this before the council. I've really appreciated everyone's testimony today in both hearings, and sort of there's certainly a very direct correlation between some of the testimony today, but a particular interest of mine was the testimony of the young people and the testimony of the teachers in particular. So just thank you both. Thank you, Councillor Wu, too, for staying after the chair had to leave to extend an opportunity for this continued testimony. It was certainly important testimony, but just the fact that everyone stayed on as long as they did to offer that testimony, I think is really important to recognize and to be grateful for that engagement. Thank you to you and thank you to the maker.
Thank you, Councillor. And final closing words from a co-sponsor, Councillor Arroyo.
Just a sincere thank you to our panelists. I think many of them are off now, but thank you so much to them and everybody who gave testimony. Much of that was deeply moving. Certainly Angel was a highlight, so thank you, Angel. And anybody who can get that message to Angel. I'm not sure if it's bedtime, but thank you so much for raising your voices and really being focused at a real municipal level. This is what we've always asked for. This is what, I grew up about Angel's age, watching these meetings and having folks basically beg for this kind of interaction from our communities. And so I'm just deeply grateful that whatever brought you here specifically, I hope you stay engaged. I hope you bring this energy to other issues that really affect our communities on a daily basis, because it really makes change. It really changes things. And so thank you so much to everybody who took part in this. Thank you to all the advocates who took part in this. And thank you, Councillor Wu, for making sure that there was a chair here. And to Councillor Edwards for running it so well earlier. But thank you to you for ensuring that we can continue to hear public testimony, because it really is valuable. So with that, I thought that was all very valuable. And also thank you to the Commissioner for taking the time to be here and to really endorse this idea. I thought that was fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. This was a great hearing. I think we all learned so much, and I want to echo the thanks to the coalition, all the community members who gave feedback along the way and over this evening, my colleagues, the Commissioner, and of course Central staff for making sure all of it went off very, very smoothly. So we'll circle back up with the committee chair and figure out next steps, but hoping for swift passage, and very grateful again that we have an opportunity in Boston to take action. So this will conclude our hearing on docket number 0683 on an ordinance banning facial recognition technology in Boston. This hearing is adjourned.
Bye, see you.
Bye.